It all begins with the beating of a heart. At the dawn of all things, the world was formless. In the primordial void of the Aorbis, the twin forces of stasis and chaos swirled, yet neither could overcome the other. Yet soon, aspects of the Aorbis began to know themselves. The first and greatest of them was Auriel, and as he spread throughout the Aorbis, he brought time with him, allowing the first spirits to awaken. These first spirits became the gods, and took names for themselves: Magnus, Xarxes, Trinimac. Each embodied an aspect of the nature of the world, and they created others in their image. But one among them was different. Lorcan was not a being of nature, but of limitation. To him, the spirit world was not a paradise, but a prison. So he dreamed of a new world, to create a soul for the Aorbis, and build a new plane defined by limitation. He went to the other gods, one by one. Some were convinced through persuasion, others seduced by trickery, and soon he gained many followers, even Auriel, who was promised the title King of the New World. Together, they breathed life into this new creation, the Mundus, and for a while it seemed like a paradise. But soon, the gods realized they had been deceived, for this new world had a fatal flaw: mortality. Every flower that bloomed would one day wither and fade. Every child's laugh would someday turn to a death rattle. And the gods understood that to persist in this new world would be to accept their own inevitable demise. Some chose to flee. Led by Magnus, they rent great holes in the sky to escape, creating the first stars. Yet others decided to stay, giving up their immortality so that the world might live. Over time they multiplied, but each generation was weaker than the last, giving rise to the mortal races. Knowing they had been betrayed, the remaining gods turned their wrath upon Lorcan. After a great battle, Trinimac and Auriel struck him down and tore the beating heart from his chest. But when they tried to destroy the heart of Lorcan, it laughed at them. It said, "This heart is the heart of the world, for one was made to satisfy the other." In desperation, Auriel fixed the heart to an arrow and sent it sailing across the seas with his bow, out of the sight of gods and mortals alike. But unknown to all, the heart was not lost. It crashed to the ground with devastating force, and the volcanic crater it formed would one day be known as Red Mountain. Over the ages, the lands surrounding this mountain would be known by many names: Dwemereth, Resdain, Morrowind. Centuries later, the brow of a ship crested the horizon off the northern coast of the Isle of Auradon. This ship was crewed by elves, who had sailed out of old Aldmeris in search of new lands. Their captain, Toranan, led his crew ashore, becoming the first to set foot in this untamed land. Looking out over the verdant hills and golden forests of the archipelago, Toranan claimed the isles for all elven kind. He drew his blade, spilling drops of blood into the dirt, pledging to never depart from these lands. The settlers named this new homeland the Somerset Isles, and worked tirelessly to make it a land where all elven kind could thrive. More and more ships began to arrive, and soon the Aldmer had spread through all of Somerset. Eventually, their ancient homeland of Aldmeris was lost. Whether destroyed in some cataclysm or simply forgotten, the memory has been lost to time. In the Somerset Isles, the Aldmer would build the first great civilization in Tamriel's history. They weaved their magic to build great wonders, above all the Crystal Tower, which was raised to echo Adamantia, the first tower raised at the dawn of creation. And for a time, it seemed as though the Aldmer had built a new utopia for their kind. But despite all its splendour, Somerset was still a pale imitation of the Aldmeris of old. It seemed that with each passing era, the elves would drift further away from their divine origins. Early Aldmer society was largely egalitarian, yet as their new society solidified in Somerset, it gradually became more stratified, giving rise to a strict caste system. The Aldmer venerated the Aedra, believing the divines to be their ancestors. Above all, they worshipped Auriel, the time dragon, the king of gods, who had cast down Lorcan all those ages ago. This religious and social orthodoxy left little room for dissent, and many Aldmer began to chafe under its restrictions. These tensions would lead to a series of schisms that would scatter the elves throughout Tamriel. It is thought that some left in pursuit of knowledge, departing for parts unknown, but others left for the call of faith. One Altmer Highborn saw through to the corruption at the heart of his society. His name was Veloth, and soon he began to preach a new philosophy. The details of his rise are recounted in the text, Exodus from Somerset. Veloth the mystic called out to those whose souls were weary, whose lives were ground out with no hope of improvement in a society founded on ambition, greed, and decadence. To those who hoped for a society that preserved traditions, praised honesty, and rewarded the just, Veloth's voice was as a golden note among a cacophony. Yet this new philosophy was more than radical. To the establishment of Somerset, it was dangerous. For Veloth rejected the veneration of the distant gods, the Aedra, and instead turned to the Daedric princes. It is said that he communed with Boethia herself in the shadow of the Crystal Tower, inscribing a series of teachings known as the Velothi prophecies. He taught his followers to worship what he called the three good Daedra, Azura, the Twilight Prince, Boethia, the Prince of Plots, and Mephala the Webspinner. Veloth preached the importance of the Sigic endeavour, the idea that through transcendental struggle, even a mortal can rise to become a god. But this new faith did not rise without challenge. The Sapiarchs of Alinor tried to stamp out this movement, and Trinamach, the golden champion of Auriel, intervened to stop the dissidents. The book, The Changed Ones, recalls what happened next. One day, Boethia, Prince of Plots, precocious youth, tricked Trinamach to go into his mouth. Boethia talked like Trinamach for a while then, and gathered enough people to listen to him. Boethia showed them the lies of the Etarda, the Aedra, and told them Trinamach was the biggest liar of all, saying this with Trinamach's voice. Boethia told the mass before him the triangled truth. Then Boethia relieved himself of Trinamach right there on the ground before them, to prove all things he said were the truth. It was easy then for his new people to become the Changed Ones. With this, Trinamach was transformed, and in his fall from grace he became the Daedric Prince Malakath, the god of curses. His followers were changed too, becoming the first of the Orsimer, more commonly known as the Orcs. After witnessing the fall of Trinamach, Veloth made the fateful decision to leave the Somerset Isles, and with his followers, he soon embarked on a great exodus in a search of a homeland of their own. His people became known as the Chimera, and their exile would become the crucible in which a new culture would be formed. This exodus, known as the Time of Great Despair, was a trial of faith and endurance. Veloth led his people across seas and through snow-covered mountains, driven by a vision of a great hawk that he claimed would guide them to their promised land. Their path was treacherous, and many doubted the wisdom of their leader's quest. Yet Veloth's resolve never wavered. According to legend, Veloth and his people were travelling through a treacherous mountain pass when their path was blocked by a wall of ice. Suddenly, an apparition appeared, a woman stepping out of the ice. She appeared before Veloth and said, "I have come to lead you home if you are willing to accept my challenge. I demand a sacrifice of you, Veloth. Swear an oath that will make you a better Mer." Veloth hoisted his mighty hammer and proclaimed, "Never again shall I wield this tool or any other to slay a foe. I have given my heart to my people, but now I shall give them more. I shall dedicate my life and my soul to them." The woman turned and waved at the wall of ice. It melted away in moments. Beyond lay an alien land of fungus and ash. She began to walk forward, and the Chimer followed. Veloth spoke to his people. "We are home," he declared. "This is the anvil upon which we shall forge a new people. One journey ends here, but another journey begins." What lay beyond the icy barrier was a land as alien as it was breathtaking. It was as if they had walked into a different plane of reality altogether, and it was hard to even believe they were still on Tamriel. Towering fungal forests stretched towards an ashen sky, their shapes casting strange shadows over the ground. Rivers of molten rock carved fiery paths through volcanic terrain. The land was a mosaic of contrasts, fertile plains giving way to desolate wastes, jagged crags towering above smouldering fissures. Yet despite its harshness, it was also a bountiful land, its soils made fruitful by the ashfall of Red Mountain. Here, at long last, was a place the Chimer could call home. Looking upon this new homeland, Veloth shed a single tear. His people had left behind the decadence of Somerset to walk a harder path, one that would test their faith, their endurance, and their unity. But adversity brought strength, pain brought resilience. In this alien realm, the Chimer began the long work of shaping their identity, a people reborn through fire and ash. Under Veloth's leadership, the Chimer flourished, severing their ties to their Aldmeri roots and building a new society based around ancestor worship and veneration of the Daedra. The Chimer built temples to the three good Daedra, revering them as their guiding ancestors and protectors. These Daedric princes were seen as both patrons and teachers, offering the Chimer knowledge, identity, and a chance for survival in a harsh and hostile world. Unlike the Aedra, who often seemed indifferent to mortal affairs, the good Daedra were intimately involved in shaping the Chimer way of life, though their guidance often came through trials rather than charity. Boethia, the Prince of Plots, was celebrated as the illuminator of the Chimer and revered as their original ancestor. She revealed to them the truth of Lorkhan's test and ensured their break from Aldmeri tradition. Through Boethia's corruption of Trinomac, the Chimer were freed from the rigid worldview of the Aldmer. Many cultural advances were attributed to Boethia, from philosophy to magic to responsible architecture. Mephala, the web-spinner, taught the Chimer to navigate their precarious existence, how to hide from their enemies and kill them with secret murder. Mephala taught the Chimer to create the clan systems that would later become the Great Houses, and taught them to find glory through killing, a philosophy embodied by the formation of the Morag Tong Assassins Guild. Finally, Azura, the Mother Soul, guided the Chimer to embrace their uniqueness, setting them apart from the Aldmer. Associated with fate, prophecy, and the cycle of dawn and dusk, Azura embodied the spiritual connection of the Chimer to change and self-realization. Together, these three gods would form the new pantheon of the Chimer. But alongside the three, Veloth also warned his people of the bad Daedra, whom he named the Four Corners of the House of Troubles. They were Sheogorath, the Mad God, Molag Bal, the Defiler, Malakath, the Vengeful, and Mehrunes Dagon, the Destroyer. Veloth preached that the four would test the Chimer and their resolve, and warned his followers to appease them. Under the watchful gaze of Veloth and the Three Good Daedra, the Chimera entered a golden age of high culture, a period of philosophical and magical advancements. Great towns and cities were built, and the Chimera developed a unique Velothi architectural style, characterized by green-grey stones, strange angles, and cryptic markings and patterns. Ruins of these great cities can still be found across Morrowind to this day, relics of a once great age. Yet during the late Merethic era, this high Velothi culture would enter a steep and sudden decline. Many of their great towers and temples were abandoned, and their culture disappeared almost entirely from the island of Vvardenfell. The surviving Velothi persisted as scattered tribes, building villages on the coasts and in the shadows of their ruined towers. The cause of this decline has been lost to the ages, but the tribes it gave rise to are the direct ancestors of the great houses who live in Morrowind today. It is worth for a moment to discuss the land of Morrowind itself, or Resdayn as it was known in those days. For more than any other province of Tamriel, Morrowind's history has been defined by its unique landscape. It encompasses all land between the Velothi Mountains in the west and the Padamaic Ocean in the east. Its northern border is bound by the freezing Sea of Ghosts, while its southern frontier borders the swamps of Blackmarsh. The west of the province is dominated by the Velothi and Valus Mountains, a rugged landscape which breeds hardy people. Central Morrowind is home to the fungal lowlands, a landscape dominated by towering mushroom forests and green river valleys. In the south, the landscape gives way to the Great Desharn Plain, its fertile black soil serving as the province's breadbasket. Here, the great cities of Narsis and Mournhold can be found, as well as the great river valley of Ur. The east of the province is home to rocky coasts and windswept islands, as well as the holy city of the dead, Necrom. Perhaps its most famous region is the island of Vvardenfell, which dominates the heart of the province, cut off from the mainland by the inner sea. And high above Vvardenfell looms the great volcano, Red Mountain, the highest mountain in all of Tamriel, formed when Lorkhan's heart fell from the heavens all those ages ago. Morrowind's landscape has a savage beauty, shaped by violent volcanic activity. This is both a blessing and a curse. Though it provides fertile soil for raising crops, it also brings choking ash storms and dangerous eruptions. Volcanic ravines, known as Foyada, cut through the landscape like rivers, and during eruptions, lava flows down them like water. This harsh climate has left large tracts of land almost uninhabitable. This wilderness is known as the Ashlands, and is home to fierce nomads who struggle to eke a living from the unforgiving landscape. Cut off from the rest of the continent by nearly impassable mountains and swamps, Morrowind has developed a unique ecosystem of flora and fauna, which have had a profound effect on the culture of the province. Crops such as salt rice and ash yams form the staple of the local diet. These crops can be fermented into liquors such as matza and sujamma, which are enjoyed at corner clubs, local taverns which often attract those on the fringes of the law. The arthropoid quama are farmed for their eggs, which must be dug out of mines deep underground, and the meat of their larvae is a local delicacy. The jellyfish-like netches are tended by herders known as netchermen, who harvest valuable leather and jelly from their strange flocks. Instead of iron or steel, the elves of Morrowind have traditionally made their weapons and armor out of bone mold, or chitin taken from giant insects. The local wildlife has even been tamed to provide new forms of transportation. The reptilian guar are used as pack animals, especially by the nomadic Ashlanders, and the towering silt striders ferry passengers between settlements. A compartment for passengers and cargo is hollowed out from the creature's shell. The caravaneer then forces the silt strider to move by manipulating exposed organs with long hooks. All of this has made Morrowind a land which seems strange to Outlanders, even alien. But to the Chimera, and later the Dunmer, It was a promised land, a place where, through trial and hardship, a new paradise could be built. But as the Dwemer explored this strange new land, they would soon discover that they were not alone. Beneath the mountains of Resdayn dwelled another people, the Dwemer, also known as the Deep Elves. Descendants of elves who had left Somerset during an earlier migration, these reclusive and enigmatic clans had carved a hidden realm beneath Nirn. Where the Dwemer looked to their ancestors and gods for guidance, the Dwemer sought truth in science and rationality. Their technology was far in advance of anything seen in Tamriel before or since. They used strange alloys to craft powerful armor and weapons, fueled their cities with steam, and built automatons known as animunculi for use in industry and war. But there was one science they revered above all: tonal architecture, the manipulation of sound to alter reality. Their tonal architects used the music of reality in mining, medicine, and architecture. It has even been speculated that they could use it to harness a power known as the Calling, allowing them to communicate telepathically over great distances. At first, the Dwemer and Dwemer lived in uneasy proximity, but soon relations became increasingly strained. The Dwemer's whole culture was built on faith, yet the Dwemer's attitude to religion was more ambiguous, ranging from the skeptical to the outright agnostic. It wasn't that they didn't believe in the gods, it was that they held them in disdain. Vivek would later claim, "The Dwemer scorned the Daedra, and mocked our foolish rituals, and preferred instead their gods of reason and logic." To the Dwemer, the Dwemer's rejection of the divine was an unforgivable heresy, a stain upon the sanctity of Resdayn. Tensions escalated with time. The Dwemer, ambitious and territorial, coveted the Dwemer's mineral-rich lands and hidden secrets. Raids and border skirmishes became more frequent, each act of aggression stoking the fires of resentment. The Dwemer, for their part, fortified their subterranean strongholds and continued their inscrutable experiments, seeming almost indifferent to the provocations of their neighbors, who they dismissed as primitive and superstitious. The early history of the Dwemer and Dwemer is largely shrouded in mystery, with few sources surviving from this period. Among the scarce relics of this time are tales like Caimar Vermidium, a fable that offers a rare insight in the complex dynamic between these two cultures. This story tells of a war between a clan of Dwemer led by Barif the Beast, and a colony of Dwemer ruled by Sethovin the Warlord. After a long struggle, the two sides agreed a truce. As a token of good faith, the Dwemer warlord ordered his armourer, Janago, to construct a mechanical golem as a gift for the Dwemer. The Dwemer brought it back to their camp, and Barif was awed by its strength. He named it Caimar Vermidium, meaning the hope of the Dwemer. But still, Barif schemed against the Dwemer, and planned to use the golem to capture Janago, and force the armourer to build more constructs for the Dwemer. So the Dwemer planned an ambush, with the golem at the head of their forces. But they were led into a trap, and the construct turned on them. The Dwemer warriors thus became the prisoners of Sethovin the Warlord. Though they were too proud to ask, Sethovin explained to them that he had been warned of their attack by a calling by one of his men. "What man of yours is in our camp?" sneered Barif. Caimar Vermidium, standing erect by the side of the captured, removed its head. Within its metal body was Janago, the armourer. "A Dwemer child of 8 can create a golem," he explained, "but only a truly great warrior and armourer can pretend to be one." Though this story is likely little more than a fable, it is one of the few surviving sources we know to be written by the Dwemer themselves. It offers us a unique perspective of the relationship between the two people, the Dwemer as proud but impulsive, with the Dwemer as enigmatic and coldly calculating. This dynamic would lay the groundwork for the eventual outbreak of total war between the two races of elves. What began as a clash of cultures soon grew into a struggle for dominance. Resdayn became a land divided, simmering with conflict. The rivalry between Dwemer and Dwemer would shape the future of Morrowind, setting the stage for events that would ripple throughout history, events that neither the devout Dwemer nor the rational Dwemer would foresee.
During this time, one of the most important and enigmatic figures in Morrowind's history would be born.
There are conflicting accounts of the child's birth, gender, and early life.
In one telling, the child was born to a Netchaman's wife, who taught them to herd the floating, jellyfish-like creatures. They later became a gutter rat in the streets of Mournhold, forced to trade their body for survival. Yet in another stranger telling, the child lived inside the Netchaman's wife as an egg. The mother was taken down beneath the sea to the kingdom of the Dreg, before being discovered by the Dwemer. The deep elves cut her open, killing her to take the egg for themselves. But the egg spoke to the Dwemer and vexed them with a riddle of love, a concept of which they knew nothing. So they placed the egg within a simulacrum, a replica of its mother, and sent it out into the world. And when the simulacrum came to the city of Mournhold, the egg finally hatched. The child then reached out from the egg, all his limbs and features, merging with the simulacrum of his mother, gilled and blended in all the arts of the star-wounded East, underwater, and in fire, and in metal, and in ash, 6 times the wise, and he became the union of male and female, the magic hermaphrodite, the martial axiom, the sex death of language, and unique in all the middle world. This child's name was Vek, but history would remember him by another name, Vivek. In time, he would rise from these murky origins to become one of the greatest figures in the story of Morrowind, his legend weaving through its history like a thread. Yet the land of Resdayn would soon fall under the shadow of a new threat. A new power was rising across the mountains to the west, in the frozen land of Skyrim. At the turn of the First Era, the Nords had overthrown the Snow Elves who had lived in Skyrim since time immemorial, destroying their civilization and driving the survivors underground. And now these Northmen began to set their eyes on the lands beyond Skyrim. Despite their differences, the Dwemer and Dwemer would soon be forced to unite in the face of a common enemy. Under the leadership of King Vraga the Gifted, the Northmen embarked on an ambitious campaign of conquest, forming what would become known as the First Empire of the Nords. Their warriors swept across northern Tamriel, fueled by their mastery of the Thu'um, the Voice, a form of magic that reshaped the world with words of power. By the year 240 of the First Era, the Nordic Empire extended its reach into High Rock, Cyrodiil, and beyond, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. The Nords quickly subjugated much of the land of Resdayn, save for the Dwemer strongholds on the island of Vvardenfell. The Dwemer were unable to resist these Northmen and their strange new magics, as the Pocket Guide to the Empire recalls. In the days of the conquest of Morrowind and the founding of the First Empire, the great Nord war chiefs, Derek the Tall, Jorg Helmbolg, Hogue Myrkiller, were all tongues. When they attacked a city, they needed no siege engines. The tongues would form up in a wedge in front of the gatehouse and draw in breath. When the leader let it out in a Thu'um, the doors were blown in and the axemen rushed into the city. For their part, the Dwemer seem to have retreated to their underground fortresses in Vvardenfell, either unable or unwilling to contend with this new threat. And for 200 years, the Nord's dominion would endure in Resdayn, until a new hero would emerge, one who would change the course of history for all. The early life of Indoral Nerevar is shrouded in mystery. His origins seem to be humble, with one account claiming he worked as a guard for a merchant caravan. But his rise would be meteoric. With his wife Almalexia at his side, Nerevar united the scattered Dwemer clans under his command. Many of the greatest Dwemer became his followers and advisors, from the warrior poet Vivek to the great wizard Sothasil and the High Councillor Vorin Dagoth. Nerevar would soon be named Hortator, the war leader of the Khyma people. Nerevar even built a close friendship with Dumak Dwarf King, leader of the Dwemer. It was from this unlikely alliance that a united front would be formed, with the aim of expelling the Nords from the land for good.
The battles that followed were legendary in their ferocity.
The Nords were led by fearsome chieftains, each wielding unique powers granted by their mastery of the voice. Among them was Chemua, the running hunger, who terrorized the land with rain that burned like bile and devoured entire villages. Another, Bag the Two-Tongued, used the thumb to alter reality itself, though he met his end in a duel of words with Vivek. Most infamous of all was Hogue Murkiller, the Mouth of Mud, who could breathe life back into his fallen warriors, creating an army that seemed invincible in battle. More than a dozen Khyma settlements fell before Hogue's might, and even Dwemer strongholds were no match for his destructive power. Yet, he too was eventually driven back by the combined powers of Nerevar and Vivek.
Yet the final and most harrowing confrontation would come against Ysmir Wolfhearth, the most powerful of all the Nordic kings.
His voice could uproot entire villages and send them crashing into the sea. It was said that Nerevar himself grappled with Wolfhearth's shouts, pulling them from the air with his bare hands. Vivek was able to turn the shouts back against Ysmir, and the sound of them sent him mad, causing him to turn and flee. Though humiliated, Ysmir was not defeated, and his hatred for the Khyma would burn long in his heart.
Finally, the alliance of Khyma and Dwemer was triumphant.
The Nords were routed, and Resdayn was free from their grasp. This victory marked the beginning of a new era for the region, as the alliance between the Khyma and Dwemer solidified into the First Council. 6 great houses of the Khyma ruled alongside the Dwemer, and for a time, peace flourished, and Nerevar and Dumak became blood brothers, their union symbolized by the gift of the twin blades, Hope's Fire and True Flame. But the seeds of discord had already been sown, and the peace would not last forever.
For centuries,
the uneasy alliance between Khyma and Dwemer was held together by the friendship between Nerevar and Dumak, which defied the hostility simmering between their people. Yet, like so many alliances in history, this one would ultimately fall to betrayal and ambition. The beginning of the end came when Lord Vorin Dagoth uncovered a dark secret.
Deep within Red Mountain, the Dwemer had unearthed something ancient and terrible. The heart of Lorkhan still lived, drumming away in the deep.
It was thought that Lorkhan's power endured through the heart, and that the Dwemer craft lord Kagranak sought to harness it. His goal was nothing short of apotheosis, the birth of a new god,
the Numidium,
a walking brass tower powered by the heart's divine energy. Dagoth brought his discovery to Nerevar, who sought confirmation from Azura, his divine patron. Her response left no doubt. Agranak's plan was an unforgivable blasphemy. Nerevar confronted his old friend Dumak, leading his hosts to the gates of Red Mountain. Yet Kagranak and his tonal architects had concealed their schemes from the king, who denied all wrongdoing, and grew furious at Nerevar's accusations. He said, "We shall not relinquish that which has been our way for years beyond reckoning, just as the Khyma will not relinquish their ties to the lords and ladies of Oblivion. And to come at my door in this way, arrayed in arms and armor with your hosts around you, tells me you have already forgotten our friendship. Stand down, my sweet Nerevar, or I swear by the 15 golden tones, I shall kill you and all your people." With the bond between Dumak and Nerevar shattered, war was unavoidable. The Dwemer, with their automatons and advanced technology, initially gained ground, dominating the northern reaches of Resdayn. Their great workshops churned out mechanical soldiers at an astonishing rate, and armies broke like water upon their mountain fortresses. It is said that the start of the war coincided with the eruption of Red Mountain, clogging the skies with ash and blocking out the sun for a whole year. Meanwhile, Nerevar rallied the Kaimer behind his cause. Ashlanders and the great houses alike answered his call, though the nobility initially resisted his leadership, leading to costly defeats. It was only after their pride gave way to necessity that Nerevar was granted full command of the Kaimer forces, and his leadership soon began to turn the tide against the Dwemer. Still, the war would drag on for more than 30 years, bringing devastation to the land. Yet soon, a third power would wade into this conflict. The Nords, seeing that their old enemies were warring among themselves, began to gather their armies, hoping to reclaim their lost conquests in the east. The epic poem, The 5 Songs of King Wulfharth, claims that the Nords were visited by a stranger, who soon revealed himself to be none other than Vorin Dagoth. The Devil of Dagoth told the Nords all about the Dwemer's scheme for the heart. So the Nordic tongues gathered, and they joined their voices in song, bringing the ghost of Lorcan, who they knew as Shor, back into the world again. And Shor's ghost gathered a great army, and breathed life back into the ashes of Ismir Wulfharth, who was reborn as the Ash King. And he led the Nords across the mountains and the inner sea to Vardenfell, where they joined the battle. In this telling, the Nords were defeated by the combined forces of the Kaimer and the Dwemer, though not before the Ash King slew Dumak, leaving the Deep Folk leaderless. Then Vivec blasted the Ash King into hell, and the elven sorcerers lifted Red Mountain high into the air, bringing it crashing down upon shore, and, once again, the armies of the Nords would be driven from the land of Vardenfell, never to return. As the war reached its climax, the armies of the Kaimer and the Dwemer converged on Dumak's citadel, the fortress within Red Mountain where the heart of Lorcan was hidden. The stage was set for a battle that would become the defining moment in the fate of Morrowind, though the truth of what followed has remained shrouded in myth and contradiction ever since. Now, let us look at the differing accounts of the Battle of Red Mountain in turn, and try to piece together the most likely sequence of events. The most detailed narrative of the battle comes from Vivec. He claims the battle began with Nerevar orchestrating a strategy to lure the Dwemer forces out of their citadel. The Kaimer armies managed to pin the Dwemer down outside Red Mountain, leaving their citadel vulnerable. Nerevar delegated the external battle to his commanders, and led a small party, including Lord Dagoth, through a secret passage deep within the Dwemer stronghold. They gained entry into the Heart Chamber, and looked upon the heart of Lorcan itself. Here is where the accounts diverge, and offer wildly differing interpretations of events. Inside the Heart Chamber, the Kaimer leaders confronted Dumak and his craft lords. Vivec describes an epic duel between Nerevar and Dumak, both of whom fell to the ground with grievous wounds. In desperation, High Craft Lord Kagrenak turned his tools upon the heart, and then, in a single instant, the Dwemer disappeared without a trace. From Red Mountain to Hammerfell, their halls were left silent and empty. But although Kagrenak and his people were gone, the tools still remained. Lord Dagoth carried them to the wounded Nerevar and said, "That fool Kagrenak has destroyed his own people with these things. We should destroy them right away, lest they fall into the wrong hands." Nerevar told Lord Dagoth he would seek the advice of the Tribunal, and tasked his loyal friend with guarding the 3 tools: the gauntlet, Wraithguard, the dagger, Keening, and the hammer, Sunder. The Hortator was carried out of Red Mountain, where he told the Tribunal all that had transpired. But Vivec, Almalexia, and Sothisil counselled him not to destroy the tools, but instead to keep them in trust for the good of the Kaimer people. For one day, a new threat would arise, and the tools could be used to protect against it. Nerevar had misgivings, but agreed under one condition. All the leaders must swear a solemn oath to Azura that the tools would never be used in a profane manner. After swearing their oaths, Nerevar and the Tribunal returned to the Heart Chamber to take control of the tools. But when they arrived, they found Lord Dagoth changed, intoxicated by the power of the heart. He refused to hand over Kagranak's tools, insisting that only he could be trusted with them. Words soon turned to violence, and in the chaos, Nerevar was slain, and Dagoth fled, leaving the tools in the hands of the Tribunal. Yet the Ashlander account of the battle differs greatly from Vivek's. It was first told by Nerevar's shield companion, Alandro Sul, and has been passed down through centuries of oral tradition. In this telling, the Tribunal were never at Red Mountain at all, and when Nerevar left the tools with Dagoth and sought their wisdom, he was cruelly betrayed. But the Tribunal had become as greedy as Kagranak upon hearing of the power of the heart, and they coveted it. They made ritual as if to summon Azura as Nerevar wanted, but Almalexia used poisoned candles, and Sothasil used poisoned robes, and Vivek used poisoned invocations. Nerevar was murdered. But there is one final telling of events, one that has remained secret for all these years, and came from the mouth of Lord Dagoth himself. He claimed that he was loyal until the end, and guarded the tools that Nerevar entrusted to him. But he was betrayed by his closest friend, and struck down as he guarded the treasure he was bound by oath to defend. We will never truly know what happened in the Heart Chamber that day. It's possible that all of these accounts may contain some grain of truth, but as the dust began to settle, a few facts were undeniable. Nerevar was dead, Lord Dagoth either dead or missing. The Dwemer had vanished without a trace, leaving Kagranak's tools and the Numidium behind, along with the still beating heart. With the tools in hand, the Tribunal would succeed where Kagranak failed, tapping into the heart and taking its power for their own, turning themselves into living gods. But this apotheosis would come at a terrible price. Azura appeared before the Tribunal, enraged at the killing of Nerevar and their forsaken oaths. She cursed their actions and foretold that one day Nerevar would return to punish them for their sins. But Sothasil mocked Azura, saying, "The old gods are cruel and arbitrary, and distant from the hopes and fears of Myr. Your age is past. We are the new gods." Vivek recalls what happened next. And then, in that moment, all Kaimer were changed into Dunmer, and our skins turned ashen, and our eyes into fire. Azura said, "This is not my act, but your act. You have chosen your fate, and the fate of your people, and all the Dunmer shall share your fate, from now to the end of time. You think yourselves gods, but you are blind, and all is darkness." At first, many of the Dunmer were dismayed by their new appearance. But Sothasil appeared before them, to reassure them it was not a curse, but a blessing, a sign of their changed natures, and sign of the special favour they might enjoy as new Myr. No longer barbarians trembling before ghosts and spirits, but civilized Myr, speaking directly to their immortal friends and patrons, the three faces of the Tribunal. But as the Tribunal rose to power, questions lingered about the fate of the Dwemer. At first, the Dunmer were wary of their return, but as the years passed with no signs of life, most came to assume that the Deep Elves were gone for good. Ever since, scholars have fiercely debated how an entire race of people can simply vanish from existence in the blink of an eye. Indeed, we cannot be sure if they were destroyed altogether, or instead transported to another plane of reality. Some have even speculated that the Deep Elves were thrown through time, or perhaps into another cycle of existence entirely. One theory even hypothesizes that their souls were fused with the Numidium, their unfinished mechanical god. Whatever the truth, the fact remained that the entire Dwemer people were gone from Tamriel, with just a single exception. Yagrum Bagan had been a master craftsman in the service of Lord Kagranak, but he was also a planeswalker, and his travels took him to an outer realm of oblivion. He was here when the Red Moment happened, and when he returned to Nirn, he found the halls of his people abandoned, populated only by the automatons they had left behind. He travelled the length and breadth of Tamriel, searching high and low for any sign of his people, before he was forced to accept a grim truth. He was the only one left, doomed to a bleak existence as the last vestige of an extinct race. In his desperation, he returned to Red Mountain, looking for answers, but found only horror instead. He was attacked and infected by a monster blighted with corporous disease. Over long centuries, the disease twisted his mind and body and cursed him with unnaturally long life, turning him into a feral beast. Eventually, he would be discovered by Dwemer, the Telvanni wizard lord, who took him back to his corpusarium and slowly nursed him back to sanity, though his body remained a grotesque prison. Yet even the last living dwarf did not truly comprehend the fate of his people, and when asked, he could only speculate. Agranak might have succeeded in granting our race eternal life with unforeseen consequences, such as wholesale displacement to an outer realm. Or he may have erred and utterly destroyed our race. Though the Dwemer may have vanished, their inventions and constructs remained as testaments to their legacy. And most importantly of all, the tools of Kagranak now lay in the hands of the Tribunal. And every year they would return to the heart chamber beneath Red Mountain to replenish their power, and be born again as gods once more.
After the Battle of Red Mountain, as the ash began to settle, the now transformed Dunmer were the undisputed masters of Morrowind, and the Tribunal their new gods.
Under their leadership, a new temple was formed, and the three were venerated as living deities. Almalexia, Sothasil, Vivek. Together, they were Alm-Sivi, the three-in-one. The Tribunal replaced worship of the Daedra among the settled Dunmer following their apotheosis, and the three good Daedra were thereafter known to the temple as anticipations of the three tribunes. The Daedra was seen as the early ancestral incarnations of the new gods. Boethia for Almalexia, Mephala for Vivek, and Azura for Sothasil. Each god embodied their Daedric counterpart, but differed in key ways. The three-in-one would reign over Morrowind for the next 3,000 years, towering high over every aspect of its society. Almalexia, also known as Mother Morrowind, or the Lady of Mercy, was the most beloved member of the Tribunal, serving as its heart. As a god queen, she embodied mercy, wisdom, and protection, standing as the patron of healers, teachers, and the downtrodden. Her presence was felt deeply in the city of Mournhold, where she had her temple, and walked among the people, offering divine blessings and miracles. As a mortal, she had been a leader of her people, and the wife of Lord Nerevar, but as a god, she was the spiritual anchor of the Dunmer people. Her acts of kindness shaped the lives of her followers, and she offered them moral instruction through fables. But she was also a mighty warrior, and wielded her blade, Hope's Fire, in defense of her people, even taking on the Daedric prince Mehrunes Dagon himself. The Hand of Almalexia were her personal guard, renowned as some of the finest warriors in Tamriel, feared and respected in equal measure. For millennia, she would stand as the living protector and mother of her people, the sacred flame that guided Morrowind through its darkest hours. If Almalexia was the heart of the Tribunal, then Sothasil was its mind. The enigmatic clockwork god, known to his followers as the mainspring Everwound, was a figure of boundless intellect, revered as the father of mysteries and the light of knowledge. But while Vivek and Almalexia walked among the Dunmer, Sothasil was reclusive, devoted to his relentless pursuit of discovering the secrets of existence and perfecting the flawed world of Nirn. He perfected his craft through his greatest creation, the legendary Clockwork City, a realm of brass and machinery inspired by the lost Dwemer. Its true location was unknown. Some say it was hidden in the swamps of Blackmarsh, others claim it was deep underground. It was even whispered it was sealed in a jar on Almalexia's mantelpiece, and that all of these were true and false at the same time. Here, the clockwork god toiled tirelessly, blending magic and technology to craft a self-contained world, free of the imperfections of the mortal plane. His creations were awe-inspiring: mechanical factotums, biomechanical fabricants, and the vast celestiodrome, which emulated day and night within the city's mechanical sky. Yet his genius extended beyond artifice. He also brokered the Cold Harbour Compact, a treaty where 8 Daedric princes agreed to curtail their meddling in mortal affairs. To his followers, he was a distant protector whose knowledge rivaled the divines. He was served by an order known as the Clockwork Apostles, who believed their god would bring about the creation of a second Nirn, a Tamriel final, with the Clockwork City serving as the centre of the wheel. A being of paradox, Sotherseal wielded the power of a god, yet largely eschewed divine worship. He was also the most penitent of the Tribunal, haunted by the death and betrayal of Nerevar. Unlike the other tribunes, he fully embraced the cursed appearance of the Dunmer, perhaps as a form of penance. Through his Clockwork City, Sotherseal sought not glory, but redemption, both for himself and the world he endeavoured to reforge, ever more perfect than before. If Almalexia was the heart and Sotherseal was the mind, then Vivec was surely the soul of the three-in-one. The warrior poet of the Tribunal was the god-king of the holy island of Vardenfell, reigning from the sacred city named after him. Vivec embodied the duality of the Dunmer people, reflected in his half-Dunmer, half-Chimer appearance, as well as his ambiguous gender. Vivec's teachings, including the enigmatic 36 lessons, provide spiritual guidance and cryptic wisdom, and are open to a dizzying array of interpretations. Revered as both a poet and a warrior, he inspired the creation of the buoyant armigers, a martial order that emulated his virtues of courage, wit, and daring. As Vivec's personal knights-errant, they defended the people of Morrowind, and hunted down evil in all its forms, from vampires to necromancers. Vivec's divine influence touched every aspect of life, from artistry to warfare, making him a figure of both transcendence and contradiction. The Dunmer celebrated his divine presence with festivals in his honour, a reflection of their unwavering devotion to the living god who walked among them. Yet, there was a darker side to his worship. He was associated with Mafala, the prince of sex, lies, and murder, and the Morag Tong assassins hailed him as their patron. It was also claimed that Vivec lay with Molag Bal, the Daedric prince of domination, in a union that lasted for 88 days. Vivec became the mother-father of demons, giving birth to a race of monster children numbering in their thousands.
And in this time, he learned a great secret from Molag Bal. Kaim, the secret syllable of royalty, and the key to transcending the prison of reality.
Then Vivec bit off a piece of the Daedric prince, fashioning it into a spear which he named Muatra, and with syllable and spear he cast Molag Bal back into oblivion and slew the demon children he had birthed, turning them to bones. But it is whispered that some escaped, and still survive to this day in the wilds of Molag Amor. With Muatra in hand, Vivec fought tirelessly to defend the Dunmer people. He battled against the Ruddy Man, the father of the Dreg, and their contest carved the West Gash region out of the landscape of Vardenfell. After defeating the Dreg King, Vivec spared his life, on the condition that the Ruddy Man and his children would give up their hide to serve as armour for the Dunmer. This event is commemorated by the Shrine of Valour within Coal Cave. He also duelled with Mehrunes Dagon, the Prince of Destruction. Yet seeing the Daedra Lord was unarmed, Vivec gave his own silver longsword to Dagon, rather than dishonour himself by fighting an unarmed opponent. This deed has been immortalised in the Shrine of Courtesy, found in the heart of the Puzzle Canal, a labyrinth deep beneath the palace in the city of Vivec.
But Vivec was also capable of great humility.
At the fields of Camus, he met a poor farmer whose only guar had died. This farmer could not harvest his muck sponge without his guar, and could not provide for himself or his village. So Vivek removed his finery and toiled in the mud of the farmers' fields, acting as a beast of burden until the entire crop was harvested. Yet perhaps his greatest feat would come during a confrontation with Sheogorath, the Prince of Madness. In a fit of insanity, the mad god flung the moon of Bar Dao through the void, and it came crashing down towards the island of Vardenfell. Vivek used his power to stop the moon in its descent, and held it looming in the sky above his city, saying that if the love of the people of this city for me ever disappear, so shall the power that holds back their destruction. Though he remains clouded by mystery and controversy, Vivek's role as a protector and spiritual guide ensured his place as a beloved and venerated member of the Tribunal. But ultimately, Vivek was a tragic figure. Sothasil put it best: Vivek craves radical freedom, the death of all limits and restrictions. He wishes to be all things at all times, every race, every gender, every hero, both divine and finite. But in the end, he can only be Vivek. And, like Sothasil, he was haunted by guilt over the death of Nerevar. If one reads the final sermon of his 36 lessons, and takes the first letter of each paragraph, it will spell out the words, foul murder, all but confessing to the killing of Nerevar. Although Vivek was able to use the heart to achieve immortality, he was never able to escape his guilt, and he had to endure its weight through century after century. Under the divine rule of the Three-in-One, the Dunmer experienced a period of prosperity and cultural flourishing unmatched in their history. The name of Resdayn was forgotten, and the land would henceforth be known as Morrowind, a realm united under the vision of Alm CV. The great houses of Indoril, Dres, Redoran, Telvanni, and Hlalu established the Grand Council, serving as the basis of secular power. Yet their influence was eclipsed by the Tribunal Temple, the heart of faith and governance in the land. The temple oversaw a religious revolution in Morrowind. In cities like Vivek and Mournhold, vast temple complexes were dedicated to the new living gods. Temple priests preached virtues such as courtesy, generosity, and humility. They taught that the Tribunal had achieved godhood through superhuman discipline and virtue, and supernatural wisdom and insight. Though the three good Daedra were tolerated as the anticipations of the living gods, the temple outlawed worship of the House of Troubles, and ruthlessly hunted down their cultists wherever they could find them. Yet some remained skeptical of this new faith. They questioned the temple's accounts of the Battle of Red Mountain and the Tribunal's ascent to godhood. But they were swiftly punished. Branded as the dissident priests, these heretics would be rooted out by the Ordinators, the martial order which enforced temple orthodoxy. Suspected heretics would be taken to the hollowed-out moon of Bar Dao high above Vivek City, which in a cruel irony was renamed the Ministry of Truth. There, prisoners would be subject to brutal tortures in an attempt to reform them. Despite this religious turbulence, this era saw remarkable advancements in magic, artifice, and philosophy. Sothasil's Clockwork City exemplified technological ingenuity, while Vivek's poetry and sermons inspired a vibrant cultural renaissance. Almalexia's compassion fostered unity and hope, binding the people together under a common faith. Under their rule, the Dunmer found strength in their new identity, embracing their ashen skin and red eyes as proof of their status as a chosen people.
The Tribunal's reign was not without its challenges. Threats from within and without tested their strength.
Yet, for a time, their divine presence brought an era of peace, progress, and prosperity.
This golden age, which spanned the last 2 millennia of the First Era and almost all of the Second, remains one of the most celebrated epochs in the annals of Morrowind's history.
Yet despite the unifying power of the Tribunal, divisions among the Dunmer never truly went away. These fault lines were exemplified in the House system, which had evolved out of ancient tribal alliances to become the political framework of Morrowind. The 5 great houses functioned as both governing bodies and social institutions, defining the political and economic landscape of Morrowind for centuries. Forged in the fires of war, House Redoran was defined by its warrior spirit, born from centuries of tradition, discipline, and loyalty. Their lands in the northwest of the province are harsh and rugged, and they rule from the stronghold city of Blacklight. The Redoran guard Morrowind's western flank against the Nords of Skyrim, repelling any raiders who dare to cross the Velothi mountains. Here, the Redoran way of life is shaped by a martial code where honor is the highest virtue, a philosophy which has been summarized by the house's grand historian in the following terms. Our housekin have held the virtues of duty, gravity, and piety most dear. A frivolous, soft life is not worth living. We focus on maintaining the traditions of the civilized Dunmer and holding fast to the way of the warrior. House Hlalu was the most outward-facing of the great houses, famed for its skills in business and diplomacy. With its capital in the city of Narsis, House Hlalu's influence spanned the fertile lands of western and central Morrowind. Their power lay in their unparalleled ability to navigate the complex world of politics and commerce. If there's one thing House Hlalu understood above all, it was the power of reputation. While profit was always a driving force, Hlalu's true strength lay in its skill of making allies out of even the most unlikely partners, even outlanders. In a land where other houses were often bound by rigid traditions, Hlalu saw the value in flexibility, embracing change as a means of survival. Their influence was not built on force, but on words, deals, and the manipulation of markets and minds. Yet House Hlalu was not without its darker edges. While some of their councillors may have been fair and just, others were notorious for underhanded tactics. Bribes, blackmail, and treachery were all part of the house's repertoire. Their retainers included skilled thieves, assassins, and spies, and they also built close ties with the Camonatong, Morrowind's largest crime syndicate. Helvani was perhaps the most enigmatic of all the great houses of Morrowind. The house is ruled by wizard lords who reside in vast fungal towers and are known for their eccentricity and isolationism. The Telvanni do not answer to anyone but themselves, and are disinterested in the affairs of other houses and peoples. They govern a large swathe of northeastern Morrowind, a land of fungal lowlands and rocky coasts, ruling from the Parliament of Bugs in the grand city of Port Telvannis. The culture of the Telvanni is one of cutthroat meritocracy, where power is determined not by birth, but by the cunning of the individual. In House Telvanni, the strong rise, the clever thrive, and even murder is accepted as a valid means of ascent. Slavery is tolerated and even embraced, a product of a philosophy where might makes right. It is a system built on ruthless self-sufficiency, where each wizard lord is a master of their own domain. Many of the most powerful magisters, such as Dwemer Ur, have little to do with the outside world, preferring to dedicate themselves to arcane pursuits. For the Telvanni, there is no higher goal than knowledge, and no greater power than the ability to exert one's will on others. Yet for all their eccentricity and arrogance, House Telvanni remains one of the most potent forces in Morrowind. They count among their members some of the most powerful mages to ever walk Tamriel, and when they choose to descend from their towers, they are truly a force to be reckoned with. For centuries, House Induril stood above the other great houses, revered as the historic House of Nerevar. Their control over the fertile lands surrounding Mournhold and their close association with the Tribunal Temple made them the preeminent political power on the Grand Council. To be born of House Induril was to be born into the legacy of Nerevar himself, with all the responsibility, reverence, and the power that came with it. The Induril were the protectors of Morrowind's traditions, the stewards of the Tribunal Temple, and the defenders of the faith. They embodied the very essence of the Tribunal's rule, their loyalty to their gods unwavering, and they adhered to a strict, orthodox interpretation of the faith. Their members dominated the temple priesthood, and even the ordinators, who wore armor in the style of the house. Their philosophy was embodied in the motto, "Justice knows no sleep. Induril shall order, the temple shall judge." The fifth and final of the Great Houses, House Dres rules over the rich agricultural regions of southern Morrowind. The Dres have built their fortune on a practice that defines their very existence, the institution of slavery. Unlike the other Great Houses, whose power comes from military might or magical prowess, House Dres owes its wealth to the sweat and blood of the captive Khajiit and Argonians who work their vast salt rice plantations. Their capital, the city of Tyr, is known as the Jewel of the East, hailed for its beauty while thousands suffer in the cruel pens of its flesh markets. The Dres are also known as the Beastmasters of Morrowind, training the land's giant insects to do their bidding. Dres slavers often use Nyx hounds as guards, and have even been known to use the dragonfly-like Paraptons as flying mounts. While most right-minded peoples would view their practices as barbaric, the Dres are unapologetic in their pursuit of power, justifying their cruelty as bringing civilization to the savage beastfolk. Together, these 5 houses formed the Grand Council which presided over Morrowind for millennia. In ancient times, it was customary for the clans to make war upon one another, though this was outlawed after the rise of the Tribunal. Still, the houses would tussle for power, fighting secret wars in the shadows. These were known as the House Wars, ancient grudges, personal vendettas, and territorial conflicts fought through murder and espionage. Assassination, while brutal, remained a legal practice in Morrowind, as long as it was carried out according to traditional rules and limitations. The Morag Tong, the legendary guild of assassins, served as an enthusiastic executioner in these house wars. It is said that no house war was complete without the intervention of the Tong, whose role was to resolve conflicts through their practice of state-sanctioned assassination. This acted as a kind of safety valve, ensuring that the violence of the house wars remained within strict boundaries and didn't spill over into open civil war. This tradition of assassination had deep roots in Dunmer culture. The Daedric Prince Mafala taught the early Dunmer to deceive their enemies and kill them in secret, and these bloody traditions would endure throughout Morrowind's history, with the Tong even taking Vivec as their new patron.
But some Dunmer rejected the house system and continued to live in the old ways.
The Ashlanders are nomadic Dunmer tribes who have resisted assimilation into settled society. They roam Morrowind's harshest landscapes with their herds of guar, living in yurts made from hides and chitin. The Ashlanders reject the authority of the Tribunal, instead adhering to ancient ancestor worship and reverence for the 3 good Daedra. Ashlander society is built on strict codes of honor, hospitality, and self-sufficiency. They survive through herding, hunting, and foraging, crafting their weapons, armor, and tools from chitin, bone, and other natural materials. Monetary wealth holds little value for them. Instead, they measure status through deeds, wisdom, and personal strength. Among them, gift-giving is a crucial custom, serving as both a sign of respect and a means of fostering alliances. While Ashlanders are often wary of outsiders, a foreigner who earns their trust may be named a clan friend, an honorary status that grants them protection and acceptance within a tribe. However, violating their customs, such as entering a yurt uninvited, can quickly turn an outsider into an enemy. The Ashlanders see Almalexia, Sothasil, and Vivec as false gods who betrayed Nerevar. They believe the Tribunal used forbidden magic to steal their divinity, and prophesize their eventual downfall. They also venerate the Dark Daedra known as the House of Troubles, but seek to appease them rather than revere them as benevolent deities. Many Ashlanders, particularly among the Ursulaku clan, follow the Nerevarine cult, which prophesizes the reincarnation and return of Lord Nerevar to unite the Dunmer and restore their lost glory. Though this belief has been outlawed by the temple, it persists among the Ashlanders, who care little for the laws of settled peoples. Over the ages, the Ashlanders have been pushed out of the most fertile lands, and are now forced to eke out a meagre existence in Morrowind's harshest landscapes. The settled Dunmer look down on their Ashlander cousins, viewing them as little more than primitive. And this disdain is reciprocal. For the Ashlanders view the settled peoples as soft and decadent, having strayed too far from the glory of their ancestors.
After long centuries of peace, Morrowind would eventually be threatened by a new power, one that arrived from across the sea.
Long ago, Veloth and Nerevar had walked across the Eastern Sea and discovered a land of snake men and snow demons. This was the mysterious continent of Akavir, and Veloth and Nerevar learned secret fighting styles from the snake men known as the Sayesi. The snake men had promised that one day they would make war on the lands to the west, and in the year 2700 of the First Era, they delivered on that promise. The Sayesi ships landed on the northern coast of Tamriel, cutting a bloody path through Skyrim. They fought fiercely, routing the Nords who rose to challenge them, and they soon set their sights on Cyrodiil too. But they made a fatal error, marching their army through Morrowind and invoking the wrath of Veloth. The warrior poet descended down to the undersea halls of the Dreg and struck a bargain with their trident kings. Together, the Dunmer and Dreg would strike at the flanks of the invaders, severing their supply lines and forcing them into a two-front war. In Cyrodiil, a young warlord named Remen soon formed an army to repel the invaders. Remen and Veloth made common cause against the Akaviri, and soon the armies of Cyrodiil would face down the Snake Men at the Battle of Pale Pass. But then, something truly unexpected happened. The dragon-worshipping Sayesi, recognizing Remen as a Dragonborn, knelt before him and pledged their lives to him. He accepted them into his service, and they became his Dragon Guard, his fiercest warriors and closest advisors. With the Dragon Guard at the head of his armies, Remen would go on to form the Second Empire of Cyrodiil, and one by one, the provinces of Tamriel would fall to his might. Over the next century, the Remen Empire expanded its control over all of Tamriel, save for Black Marsh and Morrowind. Yet, by the reign of Emperor Remen II, tensions between Morrowind and the Empire began to boil over, fueled by religious differences and mutual distrust. After subjugating the Argonians of Blackmarsh, Remen II turned his gaze northward to Morrowind, igniting the Fourscore War, a brutal conflict that would span 80 years of bloodshed. The Tribunal, and Veloth in particular, emerged as pivotal figures during the war. Veloth's tactical brilliance and supernatural power were instrumental in resisting the Empire's advance. Almalexia also played a crucial role in rallying Morrowind's forces and boosting their morale. Despite the death of Remen II at the hands of Dunmer forces, the war raged on under his successors. And as the conflict dragged into its 80th year, Morrowind's endurance was tested to its limits. In the year 2920 of the First Era, Almalexia had a prophetic dream that the war would soon end, but warned Veloth that Morrowind's fate hinged on Sothasil returning from Artaeum, where he had been mentoring members of the Sigic Order. Almalexia travelled to retrieve him, leaving Veloth to prepare for the final stages of the war. But tragedy struck before peace could be realised.
Far away in High Rock, a coven of witches took in an exiled Dunmer woman named Turala, the former lover of Brindisi de Rom, the Duke of Mournhold.
Yet the coven was soon massacred, and Turala came to believe it was the work of assassins sent by her former lover. In a rage, she swore vengeance against the Duke, and called on Mehrunes Dagon to lay waste to his city. A thick, tarry smoke rolled through the streets, igniting everything. Winged bat-like creatures harried the citizens from their hiding places out into the open, where they were met by the real army. The only thing that kept all of Mournhold from burning to the ground was the wet, sputtering blood of its people. But just when the city seemed lost, a shaft of light pierced the sky, revealing that Almalexia and Sothasil had returned. The living gods did battle with the Daedric prince in the burning ruins of old Mournhold. The Prince of Destruction was cast back into oblivion, though not before Almalexia was gravely wounded by his claws. As Almalexia recovered from her wounds, the Vex set about negotiating a peace with the Empire. After 80 years, both sides were exhausted, and the new Emperor Remen III soon came to the negotiating table. But the prospect of peace was soon threatened by grim news. The Emperor had been found dead in a pool of blood in his own audience chamber. With no heirs left in the line of succession, the Empire lay in the hands of his Sayesi advisor, Versa Shay. The killings were blamed on the Morag Tong, but some whispered that the Akaviri Snake Man had orchestrated the death of his liege to pave his own way to power. Despite this development, the Vex still managed to negotiate a treaty known as the Servant Truce with Versa Shay, bringing an end to the war. The treaty preserved Morrowind's independence, making it the only Tamrielic nation to remain free from the Second Empire's rule. Though Morrowind would endure a period of isolation from the rest of Tamriel, the Dunmer exerted their influence through a dark instrument, the Morag Tong, an ancient guild of assassins serving the Daedric Prince Mephala, and later the living god Vivek. The Morag Tong wielded a shadowy influence over Tamrielic history. Sanctioned within Morrowind to carry out legal executions through their writ system, the guild thrived amidst the cutthroat politics of the great houses. Over time, their reach extended beyond the borders of Morrowind, shaping the fate of empires. At the close of the First Era, the Morag Tong claimed their most notable victim yet, Emperor Remen III himself. This assassination ended the Remen dynasty, and enabled Versa Shay to seize control of the Second Empire, reforming it into the Akaviri Potentate, a regime which would endure for more than 400 years. And for a time, the Morag Tong operated with impunity, and no one, from beggar to king, was ever totally safe from their hidden blades. However, hubris proved their undoing. In the year 324 of the Second Era, the guild assassinated Versa Shay himself, scrawling their name in blood on his palace wall. The new potentate, Severian Shurak, instituted a brutal crackdown on the assassins. It is said that throughout the continent, every sovereign gave the cult's elimination his highest priority, and the Morag Tong was forced back into the shadows. But a new force would rise in its place, a shadowy guild of assassins who praised the dread Father Sithis, the Dark Brotherhood. The Brotherhood were driven by gold as much as blood, and soon they would take on their most ambitious targets yet. On a single night, in the year 430 of the Second Era, the Akaviri potentate Severian Shurak, along with all of his heirs, met their ends at the points of the Brotherhood's blades. Overnight, the rule of the Akaviri potentate was at an end, and its rule over Tamriel fractured. Thus began a chaotic, violent period known as the Interregnum. For the next 400 years, the seat of empire would lie empty, and the warring factions of Tamriel would push and pull for dominance.
With the fall of the Second Empire, Morrowind under the Tribunal was perhaps the single greatest power on mainland Tamriel.
The Great Houses, particularly houses Dres and Telvanni, seized on this opportunity, turning their gaze south to Blackmarsh. A land of dense jungles and toxic marshes, the homeland of the Argonians had long resisted colonization by outside forces, and even the Empire had been unable to penetrate its depths. But now, the Dunmer had a free hand to raid these lands unchecked. Entire tribes of Argonians were captured and dragged away in chains to the infamous flesh markets of Tyr, to be sold as forced labour for the great salt rice plantations. This brutal exploitation sowed the seeds of unrest in the swamps of Blackmarsh. Some accounts suggest that the Canartan flu, a devastating plague that first appeared in Stormhold in 2E560, was the Argonians' grim retaliation. The disease, believed by some to be the creation of Argonian shamans, spread with lethal precision, targeting non-Argonians while sparing the native lizardfolk population. Archivist Nella Mindor left an account describing the course of this deadly infection. General malaise, loss of appetite, and fatigue begin several hours before an afflicted victim develops other symptoms. Within 24 to 36 hours, victims suffer nosebleeds, their tears contain blood, and a granular rash spreads over their bodies. At this point, victims develop a deep, raspy cough. In most cases, death takes place in as little as 72 hours after the initial onset. Tamriel was plunged into chaos as the epidemic swept through the continent, killing thousands and bringing trade to a crashing halt. In some cases, whole populations were wiped out entirely. The Kithringi, a Nedic people indigenous to Blackmarsh, are believed to have been driven to total extinction by the plague. Still, the Carnarton flu would eventually vanish by 2E603, leaving a scarred and battered continent in its wake. But the chaos of the interregnum did not end with plague, but another dark horseman was looming on the horizon. War was coming again to Tamriel from across the sea, as the Akaviri snow demons of Kamal launched an invasion that would leave fire, death, and an unlikely alliance in its wake. In the year 2E572, under the command of the fearsome Adasum Dir Kamal, the snow demons of Akavir set their sights on Tamriel, reportedly seeking something or someone called the Ordained Receptacle. Their fleet sailed through the Sea of Ghosts, bypassing Morrowind and landing at the mouth of the White River in northern Skyrim. Their assault was swift and devastating. The city of Windhelm, caught by surprise, quickly fell to the invaders. Queen Mabjarn Flamehair valiantly rallied her forces in defence, but perished in the battle, leaving the ancient city a smoking ruin. As the embers of Windhelm smouldered, Yoron the Scald Prince took up the mantle of High King of Eastern Skyrim. He rallied a new army in Riften and fortified the city against the invaders, harrying the Akaviri as they moved south. But it was clear that Skyrim alone could not withstand the might of Akavir. Seeking greater strength, Yoron climbed the throat of the world to petition for the aid of the Greybeards, the ancient sages of the Voice. Together, they used the Thu'um to summon the mythical Ash King Wolfhearth to aid the Nords in their time of need. But the Akaviri did not linger in Skyrim. Instead, they crossed the Velothi mountains into Morrowind. The Dunmer forces staged a fighting retreat, drawing the invaders deeper through the Ashlands. Then, on the beaches of Morrowind's inner sea known as the Vex Antlers, the Dunmer army dug in and prepared for their final stand. Even with Almalexia's might on their side, the battle was fierce, and the Dunmer forces were stretched to their limits. Yet salvation came from an unexpected source. A Nordic army led by Yurun and Wolfhearth appeared in the Akaviri rear. Pinned between the two forces, the Kamal turned their backs to the sea and fought a desperate defence, trying to hold out until their fleet could arrive to relieve them. The Nords and Dunmer were unable to break the Akaviri lines, and soon the sails of the invaders' reinforcing ships began to loom on the horizon. For a moment, it seemed like the Akaviri might prevail after all. Yet, at this critical juncture, another force intervened in the battle, to the surprise of all. 2 legions of Argonian shellbacks waded into the fray, and the combined might of the 3 armies shattered the Akaviri lines. Vivek himself then joined the battle, summoning a great tidal wave to sweep away the last remnants of the Kamal and ensure victory for the 3 races. Out of the flames of this battle, a fragile and unlikely alliance was forged. The Nords, Dunmer, and Argonians formed the Ebonheart Pact, an alliance bound by blood. For a brief time, these ancient enemies stood together, united against a common foe. The second Akaviri invasion was over, but its legacy would shape the future of Tamriel for generations to come. The Ebonheart Pact united the Kingdom of Eastern Skyrim, the Dunmer Great Houses, and the Argonian tribes of Shadowfen and Thornmarsh in a military alliance. The pact was governed by a body called the Great Moot, made up of representatives from the 3-member races. During the Akaviri invasion, Hayt Amin, a former Argonian slave turned war hero, had led a revolt that liberated the city of Stormhold, a hub of slaver activity in Blackmarsh. Guided by visions from the Hist, she and her shellback warriors had marched to join the battle at the Vex Antlers. In recognition of their contributions, the Pact abolished Argonian slavery and nominally outlawed the practice across its territories. However, this gesture of goodwill was not without its complications. House Telvanni outright refused to join the alliance, and House Trez continued to practice clandestine enslavement. Compliance with abolition was slow and uneven, further straining the already fragile trust between the races. The early days of the Pact were fraught with tension. Argonian ambassadors, sent to promote unity, were met with hostility and suspicion. Some Dunmer, unable to overcome centuries of enmity and exploitation, turned away or even attacked the Argonians. Others, however, welcomed them, recognizing their shared victory and the strength of their alliance. Over time, and with great effort, relations between the two peoples began to stabilize, though mistrust always lingered in the shadows.
During this time, the peoples of Tamriel began to gravitate into three great alliances. The Ebonheart Pact of Dunmer, Nords and Argonians, the Daggerfall Covenant of Bretons, Redguards and Orcs, and the Altmeri Dominion of Altmer, Bosmer and Khajiit.
Caught between them all was a resurgent imperial state in Cyrodiil.
But this was no true empire. It was a corrupt mockery of its former glory, ruled by the Molag Bal worshipping Empress Clivia Tharn, with the King of Worms Manamako pulling strings from behind the scenes. To overthrow the false empire, the armies of each alliance marched on Cyrodiil in a bloody conflict that became known as the Three Banners War. Worse still, the chaos of the war played directly into the hands of Molag Bal, who launched a cataclysmic invasion of Tamriel that would become known as the Plain Meld. Using massive constructs known as Dark Anchors, Molag Bal sought to drag Nirn into his dark realm of Cold Harbour. Though the Plain Meld was ultimately thwarted by a forgotten hero, its scale and devastation rivaled that of the Oblivion Crisis, leaving a scarred Tamriel in its wake. As the Second Era dragged on, the Ebonheart Pact would eventually break apart, although the exact circumstances of its dissolution remain unclear. Though the Pact succeeded in guaranteeing the independence of all of its members, it ultimately failed in its ambition of taking the White Gold Tower in Cyrodiil.
Without a central authority, the continent of Tamriel devolved into an array of squabbling powers. The 4 centuries of the Interregnum are remembered as a time of stagnation, a dark age where civilization fell into decline.
Yet under the Tribunal, Morrowind stood tall, a symbol of stability in a turbulent time. But the golden age of the living gods could not last. For an ancient evil lay dreaming beneath Red Mountain, and it was about to awaken. After the Battle of Red Mountain, Lord Dagoth was believed dead, his house condemned for all eternity. But he did not truly die, and was kept alive by the power of the heart. For centuries he lay dormant in the depths of the mountain, and as he slept, he dreamed, and slowly his power began to grow. Across Morrowind, people began to hear voices in their sleep, to hear the beat of the doom drum in their dreams. And in the waning years of the Second Era, Lord Dagoth would awaken once more, this time as Dagoth Ur, the Sharmat, the devil who haunted the dreams of the Dunmer. In the year 882 of the Second Era, the Tribunal gods would return to the Heart Chamber beneath Red Mountain, an annual pilgrimage to bathe in the heart's power. But unbeknownst to them, Dagoth Ur had arrived there first, and bound himself to the heart in a dark ritual. Dagoth and his minions fell upon the Tribunal, driving them from Red Mountain, and cutting off all access to the source of their divinity. Without the heart, the Tribunal began to weaken. Every day, Dagoth Ur would grow stronger, and their own power continued to wane. From his citadel deep within Red Mountain, he would send out ash storms which choked the skies and blotted out the sun. They killed flora, fauna, and people alike, and what wasn't killed was often stricken by the diseases caused by the blight. The most dangerous of these was the divine disease, Corporus, which mutated its victims into bloated, grotesque forms and caused them to lose their minds in totality. The weaker beings who received this evil gift became deranged corporous beasts, but stronger cultists would be transformed into powerful monsters, such as ash vampires and ascended sleepers. Understanding that they did not possess the power to destroy this threat, the Tribunal decided to contain it. They channeled their combined power to erect the Ghost Fence, a vast magical barrier which ringed the slopes of Red Mountain. But this deed came at a great cost, and the three living gods were forced to concentrate a great deal of their energy and attention to maintaining the barrier. They bolstered its power with the bones of fallen Dunmer warriors, and even took the remains from ancestral tombs in the grand necropolis city of Necrom. From the fortress of Ghostgate, the Tribunal's forces would launch raids on the citadels of the Sixth House, seeking to force access to the Heart Chamber. Yet they were repulsed every time. As their power waned, the Tribunal began to draw inwards. They no longer walked among their people, instead holing up in their temples and palaces. And inevitably, the people of Morrowind began to whisper, to question their faith in the living gods. Yet as the threat rose from within Morrowind, a new challenge emerged from beyond its borders. The inexorable march of Tiber Septim, the man who would forge the Third Empire of Tamriel. Also known as Talos Stormcrown, Tiber Septim had risen from humble origins to become one of Tamriel's greatest military minds. By the year 864 of the Second Era, his campaigns of unification had swept across much of the continent, bringing all of the human realms under his control. But Morrowind remained defiant, and soon Tiber's Red Legions began to mass around its borders. Unlike the other provinces, Morrowind had never bowed to Cyrodiil's earlier empires, its divine protectors keeping it free of outside domination. But now, the Tribunal's power was waning, and they would be unable to fight on the front lines as they had in previous conflicts. Worse still, the Dunmer did not have a regular army to oppose Tiber's battle-hardened legions. Their forces were made up of irregular militias, Redoran mercenaries, and a small number of elite fighting units, such as the Ordinators and Armigers. This was further complicated by infighting among the great houses. Indoril and Dres favoured abandoning the western border altogether, proposing instead to withdraw to the interior and fight a guerrilla war. With Hlaalu advocating negotiation and Telvanni remaining isolationist, Redoran faced the prospect of standing alone against the Empire. Soon, Tiber's armies had laid waste to Mournhold, the ancient capital of the Dunmer, reducing it to rubble. In the aftermath, Tiber Septim and his trusted general Symmachus discovered a young Dunmer girl named Beren Zaya hiding among the ruins. Recognizing her as the heiress of Mournhold and seeing her potential, they took her into imperial custody, setting the stage for her later rise as a key political figure.
As the war dragged on, it became clear that both sides had reasons to seek peace.
For the Empire, subduing a land defended by three living gods was a daunting task, even with the might of Tiber Septim's legions. And for the Dunmer, the Tribunal's power was secretly waning, and their scattered forces were unable to stand up to the massed legions of Cyrodiil. In the end, pragmatism prevailed, and Vivec soon appeared in front of the Grand Council with stunning news. He announced a treaty with Tiber Septim, confirming Morrowind's accession as a province of the Empire in exchange for all rights of faith and self-government. The book On Morrowind describes the Council's reaction. A shocked temple hierarchy, which apparently had not been consulted, greeted the announcement with awkward silence. Indoril swore they would resist to the death with the loyal support of Dres, while Redoran, grateful for a graceful excuse to avoid facing the legions unsupported, joined with Hlaalu in welcoming the agreement.
Telvanni, seeing which way the wind blew, joined with Hlaalu and Redoran in supporting the treaty.
As part of this treaty, which became known as the Armistice, Morrowind was granted unprecedented religious and political concessions in exchange for becoming a province of the Empire. The rights of the great houses and the tribunal temple would be guaranteed, and though slavery was outlawed in the rest of the empire, it would remain legal in Morrowind. To seal the agreement, Vivek offered the empire the Numidium, thought to be deactivated after the disappearance of the Dwemer. The armistice also included a secret agreement with the Morag Tong, restricting their services to Dunmer clients only, ensuring that the empire would be spared their deadly attention. The armistice would lead to a political realignment among the great houses. Many Indoril nobles chose to end their lives rather than submit to the empire, and Indoril was soon replaced at the head of the Grand Council by House Thlalu, who held a more pro-imperial stance. The temple lost face after what was seen as a surrender, withdrawing from political struggles, instead focusing on earning the goodwill of the people through acts of charity. This uneasy peace marked the beginning of Morrowind's integration into the Third Empire. Now, for the first time in its history, Morrowind lay under the rule of a foreign power. Imperial legions moved in to garrison the province, and the Empire's traders scrambled to secure new markets. New cities such as Ebonheart were built in the imperial style, complete with shrines to the 9 divines. A new pro-imperial monarchy was established to rule over the great houses, though its power was largely in name only, and it often served as a puppet for the emperor. Though many Imperials praised the Empire's presence in Morrowind as a civilizing mission, there were still dissenting voices. One scholar even went as far to describe the occupation as morally corrupt, militarily indefensible, and economically ruinous. In the text, The Eastern Provinces, the same scholar would describe a ruthless system of resource extraction and economic exploitation. Within the ebony mines of Morrowind, bloated monopolists under imperial charters exploit slave labour to harvest the outrageous profits assured by rampant graft and corruption. This colonial regime would cause great resentment among the proud Dunmer people, and many were driven into the hands of xenophobic groups such as the Camonatong, who promised to cleanse all the Outlanders from Morrowind. As Morrowind adjusted to its new reality, a new political figure would come to the fore. Few figures in Tamriel's history are as celebrated or controversial as Queen Baranzyre, the first monarch of Morrowind to serve as a vassal under the Septim Empire. Her life and deeds greatly shaped the trajectory of Morrowind as an imperial province. Though her position was largely ceremonial, her force of personality and her actions during times of crisis made her an enduring symbol of the imperial age.
Baranzyre was born into the Ratheme clan, the daughter of the Duke of Mournhold.
But her parents were killed during Tiber Septim's sack of the city, and she was found hiding in the wreckage by Imperial soldiers, and taken as a hostage of the Emperor himself. There are 2 competing accounts of her rise and reign: her official biography, written by Imperial scribes, and the real Baranzyre, a more salacious account supposedly revealed by the Queen herself. The official biography portrays Baranzyre as a loyal servant of the Empire and a paragon of virtue. According to this version, she was raised as a hostage in Skyrim before being groomed for leadership in the Imperial City and ascending to her rightful place as Queen of Mournhold. She is portrayed as playing an important role in the downfall of Jagar Tharn, the rogue Imperial battle mage who tried to usurp the throne during the Imperial Simulacrum. In contrast, the real Baranzyre offers a far more unvarnished and controversial depiction, allegedly based on her personal confessions. This version highlights her rebellious youth, marked by scheming, promiscuity, and even her membership in the Thieves' Guild. It is whispered that she began an affair with Tiber Septim, and even conceived a child. After the pregnancy was terminated against her will, she was sent away to Mournhold, where she took up her title as Queen of Morrowind. Contradictions between these accounts have only heightened Baranzyre's mystique. Some view her as a loyal servant of the Empire, others as a cunning survivor navigating a world of treachery and ambition. Perhaps both narratives contain some elements of truth, reflecting the multifaceted nature of a woman who shaped the destiny of her people and her era. Regardless of the inconsistencies in these accounts, she proved to be a hugely influential figure, both within Morrowind and the Empire as a whole. During the War of the Red Diamond, Baron Zaya opposed the Wolf Queen Potama's attempts to usurp the imperial throne, winning many battles in the war. She would reign for over 3 centuries before abdicating the throne to marry Edwire, the King of Wayrest in High Rock. In her later years, Baron Zaya would return to Mournhold as Queen Mother to advise her son, King Helseth, though some whispered that she continued to be the true power behind the throne. But Baron Zaya was not the only woman who would shape Morrowind's path in the Third Era. Ataraya was also born to the Ratheme clan of Ebonheart, and she ruled as the Duchess of Vardenfell before her marriage to Emperor Pelagius III. But soon, madness took the mind of Pelagius, and Kataraya was named regent in his stead. After his death in the year 153 of the Third Era, Kataraya was officially declared Empress of all Tamriel, the first and only Dunmer to rule the entire continent. Though some on the Elder Council objected to her rule, she proved herself to be a fair and capable leader, and her 46-year reign is remembered by many as a golden age. These rulers helped to bring Morrowind out of its long centuries of isolation, allowing it to build bridges with the rest of Tamriel, who had long viewed the Dunmer people with suspicion. Within Morrowind, the Third Era would see another important development: the settlement of the island of Vardenfell.
For centuries, Vardenfell had been a temple preserve, its lands untouched except for a few sanctioned settlements.
However, in the year 414, King Lotharn revoked the long-standing temple ban on trade and settlement, leading to an influx of imperial colonists and ambitious Dunmer seeking new opportunities. Existing settlements like Balmora flourished, while entirely new towns such as Caldera and Pelagiad sprang up, funded by imperial coin. Each of the great houses approached this new frontier differently. House Hlalu embraced the changes, leveraging their ties to imperial authorities to expand economically and politically. In contrast, the more conservative House Redoran resisted expansion, aligning closely with the temple to preserve tradition at the risk of their own marginalization. Meanwhile, the isolationist House Telvanni pursued unregulated growth in wild frontiers, their magelords exploiting the scramble to establish unauthorized new settlements. The shifting dynamics on Vardenfell not only exacerbated tensions among the great houses, but also brought the Empire into direct conflict with the Ashlander nomads. And, amid these struggles, the ever-looming threat of Red Mountain and its blight remained an ominous reminder that the island's newfound prosperity rested on shaky ground. Beneath Red Mountain, Dagoth Ur's 6th house had lain dormant for centuries, quietly plotting its resurgence. Its cultists spread in secret through the towns and cities of Vardenfell, and the house quietly reoccupied its ancient stronghold of Coggeroon. Smugglers and criminals were hired to spread ash statues across the land, which afflicted any in their presence with strange dreams and visions. Blightstorms became more frequent, and concentric circles of plague spread out from the epicenter of Red Mountain. And, deep in the Heart Chamber, Dagoth Ur worked methodically towards his ultimate goal: the construction of a Kula Khan, a second Numidium that he believed would grant him dominion over Morrowind. With it, he would cast down the false gods, drive the Outlanders from Morrowind, and spread darkness and plague to every corner of the continent. The Tribunal, aware of the danger festering within Red Mountain, launched several raids to reclaim the Heart Chamber.
Yet, these incursions came at a steep cost. In the year 417 of the Third Era, Almalexia and Sothasil led an ill-fated expedition to Red Mountain, in a desperate bid to force access to the Heart Chamber. The mission ended in disaster, with the tools Keening and Sunder falling into the hands of Dagoth Ur's lieutenants, Dagoth Odros and Dagoth the Mean.
Though Vivek managed to rescue his companions, the loss of the tools further weakened the Tribunal, forcing them to retreat to their capitals and focus their power on maintaining the Ghost Fence. After this defeat, the Tribunal was forced to abandon any direct offensives against the 6th House, and with every passing year, they lost ground to the forces of the Sharmat. Yet despite claiming Keening and Sunder, Dagoth Ur still lacked Wraithguard, the third artifact necessary to fully harness the heart's power. Undeterred, he intensified his efforts, using the tools to accelerate his construction of a Kulakan. Sixth House activity became more and more brazen, with cultists carrying out targeted assassinations of Imperial officials and sympathizers. At the same time, blight creatures poured forth from tunnels under the Ghost Fence, spreading terror and disease across the land. The Sixth House's resurgence culminated in a wave of paranoia and unrest. As the living gods turned inwards, the Tribunal Temple became ever more regressive. Imperial and Dunmer leaders alike struggled to combat this growing menace. The timing of these events may have influenced Emperor Uriel Septim VII's decision to make a fateful choice: to pluck a prisoner from the Imperial city's dungeons and send them east on a ship to Vardenfell. And so it was that in the waning years of the Third Era, a prisoner born on a certain day to uncertain parents was sent under guard, without explanation, to Morrowind, ignorant of the role they were to play in that nation's history. On the 16th of last seed, in the year 3E427, a lone ship crossed the storm-tossed inner sea of Morrowind, arriving at the port of Seyda-Neen. A nameless prisoner was released from the hold of the ship and sent to the city of Balmora. They reported to the Imperial Spymaster, Caius Casades, and were inducted into the Blades. Their mission was to gather intelligence on a growing threat, Dagoth Ur's Sixth House cult. Yet, there was another hidden purpose, one that was not yet apparent to the prisoner. At first, the Spymaster sent the prisoner on a series of seemingly mundane tasks, fetching artifacts and gathering information on local factions and beliefs. Through this work, they pieced together the growing threat posed by Dagoth Ur, the mad god of Red Mountain, and his followers in the Sixth House. They also began to learn about the Nerevarine prophecy, whispered among the Ashlander tribes. This journey led the prisoner deep into the Ashlands, where they earned the trust of the Urshilaku tribe. Guided by the wise woman Nabani Mesa, they were identified as a potential candidate for Nerevarine. They were told of the 7 trials that one must endure to prove themselves as the Nerevarine. The first trial reads, "On a certain day to uncertain parents, incarnate moon and star reborn." Second, "Neither blight nor age can harm him. The curse of flesh before him flies." Third, "In caverns dark Azura's eye sees, and makes to shine the moon and star." Fourth, "A stranger's voice unites the houses. 3 halls call him Hortator." Fifth, "A stranger's hand unites the Velothi. 4 tribes call him Nerevarine." Sixth, "He honors blood of the tribe unmourned. He eats their sin and is reborn." Seventh, "His mercy frees the cursed false gods, binds the broken, redeems the mad." By circumstances of their birth, the prisoner already fulfilled the first of these prophecies, but their path forward would not be simple. The prophecy was shrouded in trials and riddles, each step demanding both cunning and courage. On a mission for the Blades, the prisoner raided a Sixth House base at the Cavern of Ilunibi. After battling through blighted monsters, the prisoner encountered the Ash Priest Dagoth Gerez, who addressed the prisoner as Nerevar Reborn and carried an invitation from Dagoth Ur himself to come in friendship to his stronghold beneath Red Mountain. The two then battled, and though the prisoner proved victorious, Dagoth Gerez cursed them with his dying breath. "Even as my master wills, you shall come to him, in his flesh and of his flesh." The prisoner was afflicted with corporus, the horrific and incurable disease which destroys the mind of the sufferer and grotesquely deforms the body.
It protects them against all other ailments, even age, damning them to a future of undying horror.
The prisoner had no choice but to return to Caius Casades in the faint hope of finding a cure. Yet there was one cause for optimism. Caius told the prisoner of Dwemer, an ancient Telvanni wizard who ran the Corpusarium, a sanctuary for victims of the disease. As their symptoms progressed, the Nerevarine made the perilous journey to the Tower of Telfir, on an isolated island off Azura's coast. At Telfir, the ancient wizard devised an experimental cure. While it didn't fully heal the prisoner, it removed the negative effects of the disease while keeping its benefits, thereby rendering the Nerevarine immune to both disease and age. With this, the prisoner had fulfilled the second trial. Neither blight nor age can harm him. The curse of flesh before him flies. Yet this was not the only fateful encounter at Telfir. Deep in the Corpusarium, the Nerevarine found a solitary figure, their body warped by Corpus and held up by an ancient metal frame. This was Yagrum Bagan, the last living dwarf. He told the Nerevarine of the tools of Kagranak and the heart of Lorcan and his people's disappearance at the Battle of Red Mountain. There are even some who whisper that the traditional tale of the Nerevarine is a lie, and that the last living dwarf granted them the power of a strange Dwemer artifact, helping them defeat Dagoth Ur without the help of the Tribunal gods, though such rumours remain unconfirmed. Returning to Caius, the prisoner was met with fateful news. The spymaster had been recalled to the Imperial City, leaving one final command: find the lost prophecies and deliver them to Nabani Mesa. In search of the prophecies, the prisoner sought out the priestess Mera Milo, who had been imprisoned by the temple in the Ministry of Truth, high above the Vex city. After breaking the priestess out from captivity, the pair fled to the island of Holomayan, a hidden dissident priest monastery. The dissident priests then revealed the lost prophecies, which claimed that the Nerevarine would be an outlander, further strengthening the prisoner's claim. They also confirmed that the heart of Lorcan was the source of power for both Dagoth Ur and the Tribunal. Upon returning to Nabani Mesa, the Nerevarine sought to fulfill the third trial and walk the path of the Incarnate. They were given no directions save for a cryptic riddle. The eye of the needle lies in the teeth of the wind. The mouth of the cave lies in the skin of the pearl. The dream is the door, and the star is the key. This riddle was coded directions to a door hidden deep within the Valley of the Wind, one that would only open at dawn or dusk. Through the door, the prisoner discovered the Cavern of the Incarnate, a holy site dedicated to Azura. The prisoner received a vision from the goddess and spoke to the ghosts of failed incarnates who had come before and died in the pursuit of their destiny. Then, at last, they were rewarded with a symbol of Azura's favour. The enchanted ring, moon and star, the symbol of Lord Nerevar himself. Only the true incarnate could wear it, and when the prisoner placed it on their finger, their identity was finally confirmed. They were no longer a mere prisoner. They were the Nerevarine, Indoril Nerevar reborn. Yet the trials of the Nerevarine were only just beginning. To fulfill the fourth and fifth trials, they had to be recognised as Hortator by 3 great houses, and as Nerevarine by 4 Ashlander tribes. Through strength of arms, they defeated Archmaster Bolvin Vanim of House Redoran in single combat, convincing the house to name them Hortator. Then, through charisma and cunning, they won over the councillors of House Hlalu, earning their recognition. House Telvanni, though, was another matter entirely. Though some of the house's eccentric councillors could be won over with words, Archmagister Gothran was unwilling to accept an outlander as Hortator. It was only after the Nerevarine slew the Archmagister that House Telvanni finally relented. The Urshalaku tribe recognised the Nerevarine immediately, though the other Ashlanders required more convincing. The Nerevarine earned the trust of the Ahamusa by leading them to a new home in the ruins of Ald Daedroth. The Zainab tribe were initially dismissive, but were won over after the Nerevarine cleared their ancestral tomb of vampires and found a new bride for the Ashkan. Yet Ulaf Pal, the Ashkan of the Erebenimson, mocked the Nerevarine, hounding him as a foreign interloper. The Nerevarine was forced to slay the Ashkan and his followers before the tribe's new leader recognised him as the Incarnate. The fractured great houses and Ashlander tribes were united under a single leader. Yet, there was still another power in Morrowind for the Nerevarine to contend with: the Tribunal Temple. The temple, and especially its zealous ordinators, had refused to accept Nerevar's return, viewing the idea as a vile heresy. But this would all change with a fateful meeting between the Nerevarine and Vivec himself. After a long conversation, Vivec agreed to give the Nerevarine his blessing and end the temple's persecution of the dissident priests. In exchange for an oath to serve Morrowind and its people, the living god presented the Nerevarine with the enchanted gauntlet Wraithguard, one of Kagranak's tools, needed to wield the other two. Vivec also revealed his master plan to defeat Dagoth Ur. First, to recover the artifacts Keening and Sunder. Second, to assault Dagoth Ur's citadel beneath Red Mountain. And finally, to use the tools of Kagranak to sever the mad god from the heart of Lorkhan. This was a battle that the Nerevarine had to fight alone. They ventured out through the Ghost Vents and began their assault on the fortresses of Red Mountain. The Nerevarine systematically targeted the Ash Vampire citadels, defeating Dagoth Ur's lieutenants one by one. The first major target was Gate Citadel Veminal, where the Nerevarine confronted and slew Dagoth Vemin, recovering the hammer Sunder. Next came the Citadel of Odrasal, where the Incarnates slew Dagoth Odros and claimed the enchanted blade Keening. Now, armed with all three of Kagranak's tools, the Nerevarine was prepared to face their destiny. They descended into the flaming mouth of Red Mountain, finding Dagoth Ur's citadel deep within a Dwemer ruin. And as they entered the fortress, a voice spoke out to them. "Come, Nerevar, friend or traitor, come. Come and look upon the heart and Akula Khan, and bring Wraithguard. I have need of it." The hero battled through hordes of ash monsters, finally coming to a cave deep within the facility. Here they found the Sharmat himself, his face masked in a golden mitre, welcoming the Nerevarine as an old friend. He tried to sway the Incarnate with promises of power and unity under his vision for Tamriel. But the hero rejected these offers, and a climactic battle ensued. Dagoth Ur was soon felled, but immediately rose again, the divine power of the heart rendering him immortal. As the Nerevarine entered the heart chamber, the frame of Akula Khan loomed high above them, the heart of Lorkhan beating away in its chest. The Sharmat, risen once more, mocked the Nerevarine, saying, "What a fool you are! I'm a god. How can you kill a god? What a grand and intoxicating innocence. How can you be so naive? There is no escape. Come, lay down your weapons. It is not too late for my mercy." Yet Dagoth Ur had overlooked one thing. He assumed that Nerevar was there to claim the power of the heart. In his madness, he couldn't imagine that anyone would ever try to destroy it. Wielding Wraithguard, the Nerevarine used the hammer Sunder to smite the heart, sending a ringing tone through the chamber. In his panic, Dagoth Ur scrambled to stop the hero, but it was too late. The Nerevarine plunged the dagger Keening through the heart, severing the Sharmat from its divine power. Dagoth Ur was now just a man, like any other. After a desperate struggle, the Nerevarine struck him down, and the Devil of Dagoth was no more. The heart of Lorkhan shriveled away and vanished, and Akula Khan crumbled into the magma of Red Mountain. The Nerevarine fled the collapsing heart chamber, and as they climbed out of the volcano, they were greeted by a vision of Azura, who spoke the following words. "You no longer bear the burden of prophecy. You have achieved your destiny. You are freed. The doomed Dwemer's folly, Lord Dagoth's temptation, the Tribunal's seduction, the god's heart freed, the prophecy fulfilled. All fate sealed and sins redeemed. If you have pity, mourn the lost, but let the weeping cease. The blight is gone, and the sun's golden honey gilds the land. Hail, Saviour, Hortator and Nerevarine. Your people look to you for protection. Monsters and villains, great and small, still threaten the people of Vardenfell. Enemies and evils abound, yet indomitable will might rid Morrowind of all its ills." The Nerevarine was granted the Ring of Azura, confirming them as her champion. The blight storms were lifted, the ash spawn were scattered and leaderless, and the sleepers awoke from their delusions. At last, the Nerevarine had fulfilled their destiny, bringing an end to the devil beneath Red Mountain and securing a fragile peace for Morrowind. And as for the heart, its fate remains unknown. Some claim it was destroyed, but others believe it is still out there somewhere, the heart of the world, still beating away. Yet the Nerevarines' trials did not end with the defeat of Dagoth Ur. One night, the hero was attacked in their sleep by a dark Brotherhood assassin. They managed to kill the assailant, but now there was a price on their head. They had no choice but to travel to Mournhold, the capital of Morrowind, to track down the Dark Brotherhood and discover the truth about the attempt on their life. Upon arrival in Mournhold, the Nerevarine quickly discovered that the city held its own host of political intrigues. The first step was to track the assassins to their lair. In the sewers beneath the city, the Nerevarine located and defeated the leader of the local Dark Brotherhood chapter. Among the spoils was an assassination contract signed by none other than King Hlalu Helseth himself. When the Nerevarine confronted the palace guards about the attack, the captain all but confirmed the king's involvement, but brushed off the matter. Instead, the hero sought help at the temple, meeting Fedris Hlair, the leader of the Hands of Almalexia. Fedris told the Nerevarine of the king's secret plot to train a goblin army in the sewers beneath the city. The hero descended into the sewers, slaying the goblin chieftains and scattering their army, putting an end to the king's ambitions of grandeur. Below the city, the Nerevarine also slew the ancient lich Barulzar, retrieving an enchanted ring called the Mazed Band from his corpse. After the hero returned, they were granted an audience with Almalexia herself, yet before they could meet, Mournhold came under attack from strange mechanical creatures. These invaders appeared to originate from Dwemer ruins unearthed beneath the city. Investigating further, the Nerevarine uncovered evidence that these fabricants were not Dwemer constructs at all, but something new entirely. With the attack repelled, Almalexia recognized the hero as Nerevar Reborn, and offered them the chance to reclaim their station and rule Morrowind by her side. But to do this, they would need a symbol to prove their legitimacy. True Flame, the legendary blade of Nerevar, which had been broken eons ago. The Nerevarine retrieved the fragments, enlisting the aid of a Dwemer spirit to enchant the blade. Once reforged, True Flame became a symbol of the hero's status as Nerevar incarnate. With True Flame in hand, Almalexia made a shocking revelation to the Nerevarine. She claimed the clockwork god, Sothasil, had gone mad, and that his fabricants were behind the attack on the city. He made one final request of the hero, to use the Maze Band to teleport to the clockwork city and confront the mad god. Nerevarine soon travelled to the enigmatic realm, battling through waves of mechanical creations, including the giant construct known as the Imperfect. Finally, they reached the dome of Sothasil at the heart of the city. Yet what they found there was a grisly scene. The dismembered body of Sothasil, his lifeless corpse hanging from a contraption of his own making. As the Nerevarine turned to leave, they were confronted by Almalexia, clad in her war mask and wielding the blade Hope's Fire. The goddess had slowly been descending into madness as the power of the Tribunal waned, and now her descent was complete. She had murdered Sothasil, then orchestrated the Fabricant attack to appear as Mournhold's saviour. And now she sought to eliminate the Nerevarine and secure her dominion over Morrowind. She mocked the hero with the following words: "None may stand in my way, not you, and certainly not Vivek. He's a poet, a fool. I will deal with him when I have finished with you. And Sothasil, he always thought himself our better, shunning us, locking himself in this hole. He spoke not a word as he died, not a whisper. Even in death he mocked me with his silence. But I think you will scream, mortal, for now you face the one true god." Though she may have been weakened by the loss of the heart, Almalexia was still a formidable foe. In a final confrontation, True Flame clashed with its twin-blade Hopesfire. After a close-fought battle, the Nerevarine finally emerged victorious, striking down the once great goddess. As the dust settled, Azura appeared once more before the Nerevarine, saying, "You have done well, mortal. The death of Almalexia is a boon for all of Morrowind, though it may take time for this to be understood. She would have betrayed the Dunmer as surely as she betrayed all those she loved. This was her curse, and this was her undoing. Weep not for Sothasil. He shed his mortality long ago, and I am certain his death was no small relief to him. These gods lived with the burden of a power no mortal was meant to possess." With the death of Almalexia came the end of an era for Morrowind.
The Tribunal's power was finally broken. Sothasil and Almalexia were dead, and Vivec was rumoured to be either dead or missing.
Either way, the curse of Azura had come full circle. The living gods were no more, and though the Dunmer people were freed from their rule, they now faced an uncertain future. Though the Nerevarine had changed the fate of Morrowind forever, like all heroes, they would soon disappear into myth. Some say that the Nerevarine simply vanished. Others, that they embarked on an expedition to the mysterious continent of Akavir. Over the next few years, the Dunmer struggled to come to terms with the fall of their living gods, and the politics of the province began to realign once more. With the Tribunal gone, and the Empire's influence at its zenith, King Helseth seized the opportunity to reshape Morrowind. One of his first acts was the abolition of slavery, a move that fulfilled long-standing imperial demands, but came at great political cost. The decision sparked a bloody conflict, as traditionalist factions rebelled against what they saw as the erosion of Dunmer culture. Yet Helseth remained resolute, declaring, "If there is to be a revolution, it is best done by a king." This new political reality would give rise to strange alliances. House Dres, once synonymous with slavery, made common cause with the king's House of Hlalu. Together, they picked apart the carcass of House Indoril, which had fallen into chaos after the collapse of the Tribunal. The Nords, smelling blood in the water, soon laid siege to the holdings of House Redoran in the west. Despite this turbulence, there was the promise of a new dawn for the Dunmer people. New heroes rose up, such as Saint Jib, who drove all of the cliff races from Morrowind. Yet this hope would be tragically short-lived, for at the end of the Third Era, the Empire would be shaken by what was perhaps the greatest crisis in its history. In the year 433 of the Third Era, Uriel Septim VII and all his heirs were murdered by a Daedric doomsday cult known as the Mythic Dawn. The cult had one ambition: to throw open the doors of oblivion and help their lord, Mehrunes Dagon, conquer all of Nirn. Without a dragonborn emperor, the dragonfires in the imperial city flickered out, and with them, the barriers guarding Tamriel from oblivion. Soon, the cultists began to open oblivion gates across the continent, and armies of Daedra swarmed through, laying whole cities to waste. The Dunmer resisted the Daedric hordes bravely, but it wasn't enough to avert disaster. With the bulk of the Imperial legions withdrawn from Morrowind to protect the Heartlands, the Great Houses were left to fend for themselves. In a bloody siege, Dagon's hordes would raze the city of Aldrune, reducing the Redoran stronghold to ashes. According to one account, the Dunmer defenders even invoked an ancient ritual to raise the dead Emperor Crab around which the city was built, but it was to no avail. The fortress at Ghostgate was laid under siege, and soon the province was on the brink of total disaster. Yet the crisis would end as suddenly as it began. Martin Septim, the secret illegitimate son of Uriel VII, would sacrifice his life to seal the barriers to oblivion. All across Tamriel, the jaws of oblivion slammed shut. Yet although the world had been saved, its people were scarred and traumatized. And now, with no heir to the Ruby Throne, the Empire itself faced an uncertain future.
The end of the Third Era heralded a turning point in Morrowind's history.
The Empire began to fracture, its provinces asserting their independence. With the Oblivion Crisis, Vivec, the last of the living gods, had disappeared for good. Some whispered that the warrior poet had been slain by the Nerevarine. Others claimed he had been taken by the Daedra during the Oblivion Crisis. Whatever the truth, his absence left a void, not only in the hearts of his followers, but in the balance of the world itself. With Vivec gone, the divine magic holding the moon of Bar Dow aloft began to falter. The moon, suspended high above Vivec City, began its inexorable descent with all the force of its suspended momentum. Desperation drove two Dunmer mages, Sul and Vuhon, to create a device called the Ingenium, a soul-powered machine designed to keep Bar Dow aloft. Initially fueled by the souls of condemned criminals, the device's hunger grew insatiable, eventually resulting in the sacrifice of innocent lives. When Sul's beloved, Ilzavain, was sacrificed to sustain the Ingenium, he lashed out in anguish, destroying the machine and severing Bar Dow's tenuous tether to the heavens. The moon fell to the ground with catastrophic force, obliterating Vivec City in a single apocalyptic instant. What was once the beating heart of Morrowind became a scorched crater, its roiling waters known forevermore as the Scathing Bay. The moon's impact triggered earthquakes that reduced cities to rubble, and tsunamis that devastated the coasts of the Inner Sea, leaving nothing but ruins in their wake. But worse was yet to come. The shock of the impact awakened Red Mountain, which erupted with a ferocity unseen since the Dawn Era. As one eyewitness recalls, it was such a terrible thing, the fire. It burned everything in its path. It flattened trees, turned our huts into splinters, and knocked over towers like they were made from parchment. It all happened in an instant. A rumbling sound, then a massive wall of flame. It was so high it blocked out the sun. I thought that the world itself had split apart. Rivers of molten rock swept across Vardenfell like floodwater. Poisonous ash and suffocating clouds blanketed the region, choking the air with death. Whole cities were devastated. Balmora, Aldrune, Sadrith Mora. Nesis, unprepared for the fury of the Inferno, was reduced to a smouldering ruin. Even mainland Morrowind felt the devastation as roads crumbled, fields were swallowed up, and the skies turned black with ash. The scale of death and suffering is impossible to quantify. Those who survived the initial impact faced famine, disease, and the unforgiving elements. Black rain poisoned the soil, rendering the land barren, while the ash-choked skies left crops to wither in the fields. Thousands sought refuge in distant lands, but many perished in the high mountain passes, their broken, frozen bodies a testament to the hopelessness of their flight. As the Dunmer reeled from the devastation of what became known as the Red Year, a new calamity descended upon them. For centuries, they had enslaved the Argonians of Blackmarsh, treating them as little more than chattel. Barely 40 years earlier, a slave revolt in the lands of House Dres had escalated into a full conflict between Morrowind and Blackmarsh, known as the Arnesian War. The war was sparked by the death of a Dunmer trader who was killed by the Argonian rebels. When news of his death reached the rest of Morrowind, war was quickly declared on Blackmarsh. Morrowind's forces defeated the Argonians, capturing thousands of slaves and expanding Morrowind's borders to the south. But now, with Morrowind shattered and vulnerable, the Argonians seized their chance for vengeance. The invasion began swiftly and without warning. Argonian armies surged across southern Morrowind's borders, their ferocity driven by centuries of suffering. Settlements already battered by the Red Year were defenseless against this tide of retribution. The city of Mournhold was sacked by the invading armies, with King Helseth presumed dead in the fighting. And everywhere they were found, Argonian slaves had their shackles broken, with many choosing to take up arms against their former oppressors. For the Dunmer, this invasion was a nightmare come true. Thrown into chaos by the fall of Bar Dow, their forces were depleted, their morale shattered. Entire families were uprooted once more, fleeing the relentless advance of the Argonians. And the Argonians showed no mercy, their vengeance a mirror of the cruelty they had endured for centuries. Soon, they had reached as far as the Inner Sea, and the situation of the Dunmer began to seem hopeless. The Empire, shattered in the aftermath of the Oblivion Crisis, was powerless to intervene, and the Dunmer, abandoned by gods and Emperor alike, would have to save themselves. Yet even in the face of such calamity, the Dunmer were not entirely broken. House Redoran, famed for its martial discipline, rallied what remained of Morrowind's defenders. Their efforts eventually halted the Argonian advance, forcing the invaders to retreat south. But the damage was devastating. The rich southern plains of Morrowind were left in ruins, with hostile Argonians still hiding in the wilds. This invasion was more than a military disaster. It was a reckoning centuries in the making. The Argonians' vengeance forced the Dunmer to confront the grim legacy of their past. It was a bitter, humbling reminder that no people, no matter how proud, can escape the weight of their sins forever. The Red Year shattered not only the land of Morrowind, but the very foundation of its people's existence, forcing a mass exodus unlike any other in their long and storied history. With Vvardenfell buried under ash and southern Morrowind overrun by invasion, countless Dunmer faced an impossible choice: to cling to a homeland in ruins, or to abandon it altogether. Many sought shelter on Solstheim, a harsh and desolate island that offered little beyond an immediate chance for survival. In a rare show of friendship, the King of Skyrim ceded the island to the Dunmer, and it soon became a safe haven for those fleeing the devastation on the mainland. Over time, the barren shores of Raven Rock bore testament to the resilience of Dunmer refugees, as they transformed the inhospitable land into a new home. Others chose to cross the border into Skyrim itself, establishing new communities like the Grey Quarter in Windhelm, where the reception of the locals was as cold as the climate. The harrowing journey faced by the exiles was captured by Saldus Lervu, a trader who barely escaped the destruction of Vivec City. I saw Vivec fall, and I knew we had no future there. I walked for days, my gwar long gone, with nothing but the clothes on my back and the ashes of my city in my lungs. When I reached Narcissus, I was one of hundreds, all with the same look in their eyes: loss, exhaustion, and an unspoken question: where do we go now? The Dunmer diaspora was more than a scattering of people. It was the severing of roots that had anchored them to their homeland for millennia. In the streets of Skyrim cities, the ash-strewn camps of Solstheim, and even further afield, the Dunmer began the long process of rebuilding, not only their lives, but the culture and pride that defined them. Yet, wherever they wandered, the Dunmer carried Morrowind with them. They preserved their faith, their traditions, and their unyielding spirit, refusing to let the trauma of the Red Year extinguish their identity. In the wake of the Red Year, the Dunmer faced a stark reality. Their homeland lay shattered, their cities reduced to rubble, and their once vibrant culture teetering on the brink of collapse. Yet even in the shadow of such devastation, the Dunmer's resilience was unwavering. House Redoran would become the preeminent military and political power in the newly independent Morrowind, and the Grand Council was moved to their capital of Blacklight. Redoran emerged as the leader of the relief efforts. Where other great houses faltered under the crushing weight of loss, Redoran remained steadfast.
Supplies, healers, and soldiers flowed from the capital to the charred remains of Vvardenfell and the ravaged settlements of the mainland. It was a monumental undertaking, but the Redoran-led efforts became a beacon of hope amidst despair.
One of the most compelling accounts from this period comes from Deros Dran, a Mournhold native who volunteered to assist the survivors of Balmora. On arrival, he found a scene of utter desolation, collapsed buildings, ash-covered streets, and people hovering on the brink of despair. Yet amidst the wreckage, something remarkable was taking place. Dunmer from all walks of life, stripped of their former identities by the shared weight of tragedy, worked shoulder to shoulder. Nobles hauled debris alongside common labourers, and old grudges dissolved in the face of mutual survival. These efforts rekindled a sense of unity amongst the Dunmer. For centuries, their society had been fractured by the rivalries of the great houses and the lingering divisions of faith. But in the crucible of shared suffering, a new bond was being forged. The relief efforts became a testament to the indomitable spirit of Morrowind. The Dunmer had lost their gods, their livelihoods, and much of their culture, yet they refused to give in. Together, they began the slow, painful process of rebuilding, not just their cities, but their identity as a people. It was a bitter path, but it proved that even in the face of unimaginable loss, the Dunmer could rise from the ashes. The Red Year confirmed what many Dunmer already knew. The living gods were gone, powerless to protect their people any longer. The religious foundation that had defined Dunmer society for millennia had been shattered. The destruction of Vivec City and the disappearance of the Tribunal revealed that the figures the Dunmer had revered as gods were mortal after all. In the chaos that followed, the dissident priests seized control of the temple, reforming its doctrines and reshaping the spiritual identity of the people. This new temple declared the worship of Alm-Sivi to be a mistake, attributing their elevation to divines as a product of misguided teachings. In their place, the temple rehabilitated the three good Daedra, Azura, Mephala, and Boethia, raising them to become the true gods of the Dunmer once more. The three Daedra became known as the Reclamations, symbolizing the restoration of their rightful status in Dunmer faith. But this transition was not without its compromises.
To preserve continuity and avoid alienating the broader priesthood, Almalexia, Sothasil, and Vivec were demoted to the status of saints, honoured ancestors rather than deities. This change, while controversial, managed to provide the temple with a certain degree of continuity during an era of upheaval.
Still, a few clung to the worship of the Tribunal, though they were never more than an obscure fringe. For the Ashlanders too, there was a new dawn. As Thara of Rahad writes in her treatise on the Reclamations, the rise of the new temple almost completely vindicated the previously persecuted Ashlanders, who had continued to worship the three Daedra throughout the Tribunal's rule. The Ashlanders are now lauded as the keepers of the old ways and having true vision. It is now quite common for many of the Dunmer people to make the arduous pilgrimage into the Ash Wastes to seek the counsel of the wise women. The reforms also reshaped the political landscape of Morrowind. House Indoril, once inseparable from the Tribunal Temple, was irreversibly diminished by the fall of its gods. What remained of its influence was absorbed into the new temple itself, with priesthood and house membership becoming essentially one and the same. While this granted the new temple significant political power, it left the legacy of Indoril as little more than a shadow of its former glory. House Hlalu would become another casualty of the fall of Empire. The Hlalu had long held imperial sympathies, which served them greatly during Morrowind's years as a province. But with the Empire's abandonment of Morrowind, Hlalu was left exposed, and the other great houses moved in for the kill. Stripped of their seat on the Grand Council, they were replaced by the upstart House Sadras, and the former great house soon faded into obscurity. Much like House Redoran's rise in the wake of the Red Year, the new temple would step into the void left by the collapse of traditional power structures. Yet, as Thara of Rahad observes, the span of 2 centuries is quite brief in the long history of the ancient Dunmer people. Whether these new arrangements will stand the test of time remains uncertain, but they mark a profound shift in the spiritual and cultural identity of the Dunmer. A people defined by their ability to adapt and endure, even in the face of unthinkable loss. As we enter the 3rd century of the 4th era, the new Morrowind still struggles to rise from the ashes of the old. With the Empire gone, the Tribunal fallen, and Dagoth Ur destroyed, the destiny of the Dunmer is at last in their own hands. Under the guidance of House Redoran and the New Temple, there has been a return to long-lost traditions, such as the worship of the Daedra. Yet there is also the promise of something new. The fall of ancient institutions and the breaking down of old barriers means that, for once, the Dunmer have the opportunity to look to the future instead of the past, and build a new culture, one that will transcend old divisions and bring them together as a unified people. Although Morrowind has suffered greatly in the new era, it has been far from alone in its struggles. From the years 4E 171 to 175, The Great War between the Empire and the Aldmeri Dominion devastated much of Tamriel, and across the mountains, Skyrim has been racked by a civil war between Imperials and Stormcloaks. Yet Morrowind has been largely insulated from these conflicts, focusing instead on rebuilding its strength and stability. Whether Morrowind will ever re-emerge as a great power remains to be seen, but one thing is clear.
The Dunmer will defend their homeland to the end, against men, Mer, or any other invaders. The history of Morrowind has been a history of struggle. From the exodus of the Chimera to the devastation of the Red Year, the people of Morrowind have always had to fight for their place in the world. Yet, with each tragedy, they rise from the ashes, tempered like steel, finding strength through adversity, resilience through pain.
This struggle is the reason Lorkhan created Nirn all those ages ago, so that mortals may find transcendence through suffering, to break free of the dream that clouds our minds and finally achieve true liberation. It is the same truth that led Veloth to lead his people into the star-wounded East, and that Vivek preached in his cryptic sermons. And, if as Vivek said, heaven must be reached through violence, perhaps no one is better placed to find it than the Dark Elves of Morrowind. Yet for now, the Dunmer face an uncertain future, and it's impossible to tell what the New Age will bring. But history has taught us one thing, that no matter what tragedy befalls the people of Morrowind, the Dunmer will always rise again. And who better understands this than the Dunmer themselves? So we will end this story with the immortal words of the Ashlander poet Zusishi Musmamul. Rise from darkness, Red Mountain. Spread your dark clouds and green vapors. Birth earthquakes, shatter stones. Feed the winds with fire. Flay the tents of the tribes from the land. Feed the burned earth with our souls. Yet never shall you have your rule over me. Never shall I tremble or flinch from your power. Never shall I yield my home and hearth. And from my tears shall spring forth the flowers of grassland springs.
Thank you for watching, and sticking around until the end. I hope you enjoyed hearing about Morrowind as much as I enjoyed talking about it. This video is a lot longer than any other one I've made, and it took me quite a long time to get it done. I'd love to bring more videos to you of this length and style, so please consider liking and subscribing. It will really help the channel. And please let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if there are any other topics you'd like to see me cover. But I think I've gone on for long enough, so until next time, wealth beyond measure.